Chapter 164. Life went back to its normal routine. The couple spent all day around the little girl, and the little girl was clamoring to go to the tea house every day. The reason why she insisted on going to the tea house every day was because she wanted to play with the twins. Therefore, the tea house by Hohai Lakeside opened punctually every day even though business wasn't good. There were only a few customers, and they couldn't even cover the water and electricity bills, not to mention the rent. The so-called building a house in the human realm without the noise of carriages and horses. What can a gentleman do? His heart is biased. This was already the realm described by Tao Yuanming. Nowadays, many people yearned for this kind of life, not to mention whether they were really artistic or not. This kind of life was easy to achieve, but that kind of transcendent state of mind was not something everyone could have. Therefore, even Gu Lao couldn't help but sigh sometimes. This couple was really like an old man in a young man's skin. Chen Shi had stayed in heavenly spiral for 500 years. Although he spent most of his time cultivating, he had lived for 500 years after all. With his current lifestyle, he would be despised by the sect if he were to stay in heavenly spiral. He didn't want to improve himself, he was willing to degrade himself, and he took pleasure in it. As for Qin Ruoying, if her identity as a Xian Nu was not taken away, she could barely be considered an ordinary person. However, she had been indifferent since she was young. As a Xian Nu, she yearned for the life of an ordinary person. The most exciting time in her life was the few years when she met Chen Shi. Such a pair of husband and wife was truly a rare existence in modern life. Plato once said, "Each of us is only half a person, so each of us is always looking for the other half to combine with himself." In a person's life, about 2 million people will pass by. The probability of two strangers meeting and falling in love is 0.000049. Meeting didn't mean knowing each other didn't mean knowing each other, and knowing each other didn't mean love. Chen Shi and Qin Ruoying were very lucky because they met, knew each other, and fell in love. Even more lucky was that they had a product of their love. Just like the casual game, Traveling Frog, which became popular overnight throughout the country. Nian Nian was the little frog that Chen Shi and Qin Ruoying raised together. Nian Nian was still young, so her biggest hobby was to play. When she grew up, perhaps she would be like this little frog. She would bring her own lotus leaf hat and luggage, then bid farewell to her parents and travel to the outside world alone. Along the way, who would Nian Nian meet? What kind of novel things would she see? What kind of life experiences would she have? As parents, Chen Shi and Qin Ruoying knew nothing about this. Children would eventually grow up, and Nian Nian would eventually become an independent existence. They would not be able to interfere too much, so they could only place their concern and longing for her. The popularity of The Traveling Frog was due to the subtle relationship between parents and their children. In a small tea house by the lakeside of Hohai, a happy and blissful family. In a leisurely life in the garden, Chen Shi and Qin Ruoying were waiting. When Nian Nian grew up and became the little frog that liked to travel. December 6th, light snow. The little girl sat in the children's playground and threw the blocks in her hands in boredom. She built a castle out of building blocks and wanted to show it off to others, but the brothers never came. She had no choice but to call the big cat. "Big cat, big cat." The big cat may have been lazy recently. It lay on the bar all day without moving, as if it was about to hibernate. After hearing the little fellow's cry, the big cat reluctantly meowed. It then jumped up from the bar and landed beside the little fellow with a few big leaps. "Big cat, I'll build a castle for you." After a lazy response, the big cat curled up on the climbing mat and let the little girl surround it with blocks. According to the big cat's size, the little girl was busy. She was also experienced in this recently, so it didn't take her long to build a castle and cover the big cat inside. Looking at her masterpiece, the little girl couldn't help clapping her hands and giggling. "How about the big cat? Do you like it?" Meow. In the doorway of the building castle, the big cat narrowed its eyes and meowed casually, then fell asleep again. The little girl lay on the mat, tilted her head and glanced at the big cat in the castle. Seeing that it didn't cooperate at all, she suddenly lost interest. Gu Lao must have been delayed by something today, so he didn't bring the twins. Without the company of the two brothers, the little girl was obviously not used to it. She sat on the cushion and thought for a while. Then, she suddenly stood up and ran to Qin Ruing's side without even putting on her shoes. Qin Ruing was reading a book. When she saw her coming, she immediately picked her up and asked with a smile, "Nian Nian, what's wrong?" "Mama, when will my brothers come? Do they not want to play with me anymore?" The little girl pouted and looked wronged. Seeing this, Qin Ruing could only smile helplessly and said, "My brothers have something to do, so they can't play with you today. Wait until tomorrow, they will come again tomorrow." Chen Shi was changing the water in the kettle. Seeing the little girl's dejected look, he immediately interrupted and said, "Nian Nian, it's rare that you're free today, why don't we take you out to play? Where are we going? How about going to the mall to eat KFC?" Hearing this, the little girl's eyes suddenly lit up, and she immediately responded, "Okay. I want to eat KFC." "Then you go and put on your shoes. When you're done, we'll go out." But the little girl ran back to put on her shoes. Chen Shi's cooking was much better than KFC's, and the little girl was just looking for something new. Qin Ruing naturally didn't have any objections to eating a meal once in a while, so she let it be. The tea house closed early again. The family of three stepped on the light snow and walked to Dongming Alley. When they passed by the courtyard, Chen Shi suddenly asked Qin Ruing to wait for him, and then ran into the courtyard like a wisp of smoke. After waiting for a while, Chen Shi came out again. When Qin Ruing saw his secretive look, she knew that he must be up to something again. Thus, she looked at him with a faint smile, waiting for him to explain himself. Seeing this, Chen Shi didn't hide anything and immediately took out two things from behind her. Dang dang dang, when Qin Ruing saw it, she suddenly did not know whether to laugh or cry. Chen Shi held the household register in his hand, one for her, and the other for Qin Shi and Yan Yan. After seeing the household register, Qin Ruing understood what he wanted to do, so she asked with a smile, "Do you still care about these things?" "Of course, we have a child illegally living together, so we have to make up for it." At this time, the little girl grabbed the household register in Qin Shi's hand, and then curiously turned it over. "Papa, what is this?" She did not know how to read, so she pointed to the 5 characters on it and asked, "Household register. Come on, Papa will teach you how to read." Holding the little girl in his arms, Chen Shi pointed to the Chinese characters on the household register and taught her to read. The family of 3 walked out of the alley. When they were about to walk out of the alley, Qin Ruing suddenly could not help looking back at the familiar alley. In a trance, she seemed to have returned to the past. At that time, she would walk through this alley every day. But at that time, she did not think. Chapter 165. After the family of 3 left Dongming Alley, Chen Shi took a taxi and went straight to the Civil Affairs Bureau. The Civil Affairs Bureau was a magical place. Compared to the Human Resources and Social Security Bureau, the Civil Affairs Bureau was much more leisurely. The door was open, and anyone could come and go. What was even more amazing was that next to the marriage counter was the divorce counter. They went in and came out. They went in again and came out again. Countless gratitude and grudges, and endless expressions of all living beings. Today was not a big day, and the weather was not good, so there were not many people who came to go through the formalities. As soon as the family of 3 walked into the hall, countless eyes fell on them. It couldn't be helped. Compared to ordinary people, Qin Shi and Qin Ruing's looks were too high. Some people who did not know the situation even thought that they were an unknown celebrity couple. What was even more eye-catching was that Qin Shi was holding a lively and cute little girl in his arms. The child was already so big, but they still came to the Civil Affairs Bureau. Obviously, they were here to go through the divorce procedures. The young couple looked quite compatible. They were probably young and immature, so they got married and divorced impulsively. This kind of thing was common in the Civil Affairs Bureau. What a pity! Countless people secretly sighed. However, what made everyone's jaws drop was, Chen Shi did not take the divorce registration number, but the marriage registration number. When he came to the marriage registration counter with the number, the staff around him could not help but look at him. It was not unheard of to get on the bus first and then buy the ticket, but it was really rare to see someone come to buy the ticket when they were almost at the terminal. There were very few people getting married today, so it was Chen Shi's turn immediately. He put the little fellow down, and then he and Qin Ruing held the little fellow's hand as they walked to the counter. The Civil Affairs Bureau was under the control of the local government, so the policies and charging standards were slightly different in each place. It was okay in Shangjing. Taking the number, filling in the form, taking photos, and getting the certificate cost 9 yuan, and taking photos 30 yuan. As long as the procedures were complete, they could get the marriage certificate in 20 minutes. When Chen Shi got 2 brand new marriage certificates from the registration counter, a very strange feeling suddenly surged from his heart. They got married just like that. Unlike the excitement of a wedding, when they were getting their marriage certificate, they felt an indescribable heaviness. This was not a derogatory term, but a complimentary one. It was a very complicated feeling. Perhaps it was his sense of responsibility. He looked at the marriage certificate in his hand and then looked at his lover beside him. Even the look in his eyes was slightly different. Chen Shi wanted to show the marriage certificate to Qin Ruing, but the little girl in her arms snatched it away. The little fellow looked at her parents in the photo and giggled for a while. Then, she suddenly stopped smiling and pouted at Chen Shi. "Papa, why am I not in the photo?" Without waiting for Chen Shi to reply, she seemed to have thought of something and immediately shouted, "Family portrait! Family portrait! I want to be in there too." This was a public place. Besides those who were preparing to get married, there were also those who were preparing to get divorced. Many people were already in a bad mood, so when they heard her words, their faces immediately darkened. "Shoo, you can't be loud in public." Qin Ruing quickly stopped the little fellow. Showing affection in this place was simply rubbing salt on other people's wounds, so it was better to restrain herself. In order to meet the little fellow's request, the couple quickly took her to a corner, and then Chen Shi took out his mobile phone. Click. The couple leaned close to each other. The little fellow sat in the middle of them, holding her little face with both hands and sticking out her little tongue to make a face. Looking at this family portrait, both of them didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The little fellow took the mobile phone from Chen Shi. When she saw herself in the mobile phone, she immediately seemed to have succeeded in a prank and couldn't help but giggle. Just as the 3 of them were showing off their love, a couple in front of the divorce counter started arguing. Marriage required a photo of the 2 people, and divorce required a photo of 1 person. Because the size of the photo provided by the woman was not up to standard, there was no way to go through the formalities, so the man asked the woman to go out and take another photo. The woman was unwilling, so the 2 of them quarreled in the hall. "You're deliberately looking for trouble, aren't you? You've done it twice and you still can't get it done. Let me tell you, I don't want to do it a 3rd time. Are you in such a hurry to marry that vixen?" The man's attitude was very bad, so the woman's mood immediately rose, and she opened her mouth to retort. Their voices were very loud, and they immediately attracted the attention of everyone present. When the man heard the woman's words, he was so angry that even his face turned red, so he roared angrily, "Watch your mouth. At this point, both of us know what's going on. Don't embarrass yourself here with me." The woman was stunned. After hesitating for a moment, she suddenly threw herself into the man's arms. Then, the woman cried bitterly as she lay in the man's arms and murmured, "I don't want a divorce. I don't want it. Let's start over, okay? Okay?" The man was also stunned. Looking at the most familiar stranger in front of him, the oath he once made immediately echoed in his ears. After all, she was the person he was most familiar with. After a deep sigh, the man didn't push the woman away, but gently hugged her. At this moment, the staff at the counter smiled and said, "Why don't you 2 go back and think about it?" She came twice, but she even got the size wrong. Was this woman really that stupid? It was because she didn't want a divorce. Looking for trouble, this was the last way she could think of to delay it. However, after hearing the staff's words, the man gently shook his head. He whispered a few words to the woman, then pulled her out of the hall. This kind of episode happened almost every day, so the staff had long been numb to it. Seeing that the man and woman seemed to be in a dilemma for a while, he directly called the next number. The little girl looked at the scene in front of her in a daze. With her young mind, She really couldn't understand the complexity of it. After seeing the man and woman leave, the little girl raised her head and asked in confusion, "Why is Auntie crying?" "Because she's going to be separated from Uncle." "Why does Uncle want to be separated from Auntie?" She didn't know how to answer. After hesitating for a moment, he had to smile and rubbed the little girl's head, and then very stiffly changed the topic. "Come, let Dad hug you and let Mom rest. We're done with our business. Now I'll take you to eat KFC. Are you happy?" "Yes." As soon as she heard about KFC, the little girl fell into the trap. After obediently climbing into Shi's arms, she began to talk about what she wanted to eat later. Then, under the envious eyes of many people, Shi held the little girl in one hand and Qin Ruing in the other hand, and slowly walked out of the marriage registration office. Marriage was like a carved ship. It depended on how you appreciated it and how you steered it. If you were wise, even if you didn't know your lover before marriage, you could be respectful to your lover after marriage. Chapter 166. Using KFC as bait, Shi took the little fellow out. After getting the marriage certificate, the family of 3 took a taxi and went straight to the World Trade Center. When Shi brought the little fellow to Shangjing last time, the father and daughter mostly went to scenic spots. This time, when they suddenly came to the shopping mall, the little fellow was immediately dazzled by the dazzling lineup of shops on both sides of the street. There were many big shopping malls in Shangjing, and the World Trade Center's Heaven Staircase was relatively unique. Because it had a semi-closed pedestrian street, and above the pedestrian street, there was a 250-meter-long LED electronic light screen. In the evening, the sky screen would begin to play various videos, so there were often marriage proposals here. For 3,000 yuan, you could play a 3-minute proposal video on the sky screen. When the video suddenly played, the moment of romance could really melt anyone. Therefore, it was rumored that the success rate of marriage proposals here was particularly high. It was still early and it was winter, so the World Trade Center's Heaven Staircase looked a little deserted. The couple took the little fellow around and then went into a children's experience hall. The children's experience hall was very large, and as soon as they entered, they saw a huge Tyrannosaurus Rex. The little fellow was startled by the vivid Tyrannosaurus Rex. After coming back to her senses, she immediately asked Shi to put her down, and then ran to the Tyrannosaurus Rex, tiptoed, and shook hands with it. While shaking hands with the Tyrannosaurus Rex, the little fellow turned back and asked, "Papa, what is this?" "It's a Tyrannosaurus Rex, an extinct animal, so you can't see it in the zoo." "Oh." The little fellow surrounded the Tyrannosaurus Rex and studied it carefully. Shi watched her, and Qin Ruing turned around to buy her a ticket. After playing with the Tyrannosaurus Rex for a while, the little fellow ran back to Shi and then pulled him into play. This Tyrannosaurus Rex had attracted her attention, so she was very interested in the things inside the experience hall. The floor of the children's experience hall was cushioned, so shoes could not be worn in. After changing shoes, the family of 3 walked into the entertainment area. After entering the door, there was a large sand pit. The sand was carefully selected fine sand. The little fellow changed into her boots and jumped in directly. In the sand pit, there was an excavator toy that was especially popular in the past 2 years. Under Shi's guidance, the little girl successfully operated the excavator to dig out a pile of sand and put it into the hopper truck. Then, she happily rolled around in the sand pile. As a professional children's experience center, there were too many toys here. There were children's castles, children's rock climbing, small tunnels, and combination maze slides. There was everything that one could think of, but there was nothing that one could not see. After playing 1 round, the little guy was already so tired that he was dripping with sweat. Even his underwear was soaked with sweat. In order to let her rest, the couple continued to bring her inside and came to the painting area. The little girl had learned to draw in kindergarten, so when she got the coloring board, she sat on the stool obediently and studied it. Shi and Qin Ruing sat on either side of her and watched her casually paint on the drawing board with a watercolor pen. In just a short while, the perfectly fine Sun Wukong was smeared all over by her. Looking at her masterpiece, the little fellow was very proud. She handed it to Qin Ruoying as if it was a treasure and asked her to praise her. Qin Ruoying and She did not know whether to laugh or cry. Then, Qin Ruoying taught her step by step and wrote her name in the blank space of the drawing board. She was going to show it to her when she grew up. The handwriting was crooked, like earthworms crawling around. It took a lot of effort to barely distinguish what she wrote. Chenyan. For the whole afternoon, the family of 3 was immersed in the experience center. If the little fellow was not hungry, she probably would not have been willing to come out. Before leaving, the little fellow was really conflicted. After she bought her a bear that was half her height. The little fellow reluctantly left the children's experience center with the bear. When they walked out of the experience center, the sky was completely dark. At this time, the world staircase really showed its unique charm. Flowing lights and colorful neon lights flashed. A giant screen with an area of 7,500 square meters was constantly blooming above the pedestrian street. The little fellow stood on the steps, holding the teddy bear. When she looked up and saw the underwater world animation on the sky screen, she could not help but open her mouth and exclaim, "Papa! Is that a dolphin?" And yes, a dolphin. What about that white one? It's a whale. Is that a tortoise? Kind of, but you should call it a sea turtle. Oh, the little fellow nodded her head woodenly. Shi's science was no different from a book to her. In order to let the little fellow see more clearly, the couple took her directly to the bottom of the sky screen. But at this time, the little fellow saw the Christmas tree in the middle of the pedestrian street. It was a large silver Christmas tree 8 meters tall, surrounded by plush snowmen and many plush deer. The Christmas tree shone with silver light and looked particularly dazzling. The little fellow ran to the fence and wanted to reach over the fence to touch the plush snowman next to her, but was stopped by Qin Ruoying in time. "Nyan, don't climb over the fence without permission, understand?" Oh, hearing her mother's words, the little fellow nodded obediently and then stepped back. In order to prevent the little fellow from running around again, Shi held her in his arms and asked with a smile, "Nyan, it's time to eat. Let's come out to play after dinner, okay?" "But then what do you want to eat? It's all food here." Hearing this, the little fellow sat in his arms and twisted her body to look around. Actually, the child only ate KFC for novelty. After coming out to play for so long, she naturally had long forgotten about KFC. She could not read, so she looked around and did not see anything. Seeing that she did not have any ideas, she turned to look at Qin Ruoying. Qin Ruoying pondered for a moment, then pointed to the boiling fish village not far away and said with a smile, "How about that one? It seems to be Sichuan cuisine. It should be good?" Aunt Zhang was from Chengdu, and both mother and daughter grew up eating her cooking. Naturally, they had a special feeling for Sichuan cuisine. The rent in the World Trade Center was very expensive, so the consumption level was naturally high. The decoration of this restaurant was very luxurious, and the environment was even better than Sally's restaurant in Zhonghai. Boiled fish, gluttonous frog, husband and wife lung slice, saliva chicken, spicy pork trotters, and all of them were spicy. The child was still young, so Qin Ruoying specifically asked for less chili, just a little spicy. But even so, the little fellow's face was red from the spiciness. She kept sucking in the cold air, but her mouth did not stop for a moment, and she kept shouting that it was delicious. She was strong on the outside but weak on the inside. She shouted that it was delicious, but she could not eat much before she was full. Qin Ruoying could not eat much either. Looking at the table full of leftovers, she had to ask the waiter to pack it up. After eating, the little fellow seemed to be tired. After she handed the toy bear to Qin Ruoying, she obediently shrank in Shi's arms. In just a short while, he had already fallen into a deep sleep. Chapter 167. The next morning. When Qin Ruoying got up and washed up, Shi was already busy in the yard. He dug another hole in the blue stone floor that had just been paved. After glancing at the little guy who was still sleeping soundly, Qin Ruoying quietly walked out of the west wing. When she came to Shi's side, she found that Shi had gotten a jar from somewhere. He was squatting next to the jar, busy with something. After noticing that Qin Ruoying came over, Shi looked back at her, picked up a bowl from the side, and scooped some wine from the jar with the bowl. Qin Ruing just took the bowl from him, and a fragrant smell of wine rose directly from the bowl and hit her nose. The smell of the wine was very light, and there was a slight indescribable fragrance in it. "This is wine." "Yes, have a taste." Hearing this, Qin Ruing picked up the bowl and took a sip. She didn't drink and didn't know much about wine. But with this sip, she could still feel a fragrant but not overpowering, mellow and elegant taste from it. In the unique spicy taste of white wine, there was a clear, refreshing, mellow and clean taste. It was really soft in the mouth, and the aftertaste was pleasant. It was very delicious. "What wine is this?" "Daughter's red." "How is it?" "My skills are good, right?" "You can make wine?" "Of course, your husband knows everything, and there is nothing he can't do." She smiled proudly. Qin Ruing smiled and glanced at the empty wine bottle beside him, but didn't say anything. Mai, Fengjiu, Luzhou Laojiu, Shifengjiu, the 4 famous wines of Huaxia were all taken by him. In addition, there was also Wuyangye, Guojiu 1573, Jianen Chun, and so on. No matter what type of wine it was, whether it was Maotai flavored, Qingfeng flavored, or Feng flavored, they were all put into a soil jar by Qin Shi. This was a jar of wine that gathered the great achievements of all kinds of wine, soaked wine. The wine was not important. What was important was the spirit medicine within. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that every drop was a great supplement in the world. 1 drop was equivalent to a Peiyuan Dan. After being refined by Qin Shi with her immortal techniques, the wine could truly be considered the so-called nectar of the bejeweled nectar. After the wine entered his mouth, the spiritual qi of heaven and earth contained in it flowed through his throat and into his limbs. Qin Ruing only felt that the more she drank, the more sober she became. In a short while, she drank the entire bowl of wine into her stomach. Seeing that she liked it very much, Qin Shi asked with a smile, "Would you like another bowl?" Hearing this, Qin Ruing thought for a moment and shook her head. She chuckled and said, "This is not the time to drink Nuer Hong. Let's bury it. When Nian Nian gets married in the future, we'll have a drink together." "All right." After covering the jar and putting it into the hole under the locust tree, Qin Shi set up a spirit gathering formation and a spirit binding formation around it. In order to prevent it from being accidentally destroyed, Qin Shi even set up a defensive formation. What a joke! This was the new Hong that he had specially brewed for Nian Nian. What if it was stolen? As early as 304 AD, the world's first botanist, Ji Han, wrote The Description of Southern Vegetation. It said that when a woman was a few years old, she would brew wine. When a woman was about to get married, she would prepare wine for the guests. It was called Nu Hong, and the taste was absolutely delicious. After giving birth to a daughter, she would brew a jar of Nu Hong and hide it under the osmanthus tree at home. When she was free, she would step under the osmanthus tree a few times, as if her heart would feel more at ease. The daughter's hair would be tied with a red headband. Her eyebrows and eyes would be like willow leaves during the Qingming festival. She would become more beautiful and bigger day by day. When the daughter got married, the father would dig out this jar of wine as a dowry. According to the customs of ancient times, the first 3 bowls of wine that the daughter scooped out of the jar would be presented to her father-in-law, and her husband. The meaning was that she prayed for the family to be healthy and prosperous. Daughters were the treasures of fathers. When he thought that Nian Nian would grow up and get married in the future, Qin Shi felt like the cabbage that he had worked so hard to grow had been eaten by a pig. Many people felt that it was a loss to have a daughter, but they never thought that other people's pigs had eaten their cabbage, but it was because of this cabbage that other people's pigs had become their pigs. Of course, this was just a joke. After all, the idea of favoring boys over girls was not as serious as before. After using soil to cover the jar, Qin Shi restored the tiles on the ground to normal. No one would be able to tell that there was a jar of wine buried under the ground. He turned around and was about to call Qin Ruing back to the room when Qin Ruing looked thoughtfully at the east wing and asked, "It's been 3 days. Why hasn't Yuan Qing returned yet?" "She's probably delayed by other things. Don't worry, she'll be fine." After indicating that Qin Ruing did not need to worry, Qin Shi led her back to the west wing. Perhaps it was because she was too tired from playing yesterday, so it was already past 9 in the morning, but the little fellow was still asleep. It was rare for the little fellow to sleep so soundly, so the couple did not wake her up. Instead, they sat in the other corner of the room and let Chen Shi guide Qin Ruing's cultivation. Qin Ruing's cultivation was also slacking. Even if Chen Shi gave her all kinds of cheats, she had only just stepped into the early stage of qi refinement after cultivating for so long. She was not anxious at all. When it was about 11 o'clock in the morning, the little guy finally let out a whimper. During this time, Qin Ruing had been taking care of her. After hearing the little fellow's moans, Qin Ruing immediately stopped cultivating and quickly walked to the bedside. "Nian Nian, are you awake?" The little fellow did not speak. She mumbled and rolled on the bed. After she moved her body and was almost awake, Qin Ruing picked her up from the bed and went straight to the bathroom. Probably because she slept for too long, the little fellow did not come back to her senses for a long time. After washing up, she directly lay on Qin Ruing's shoulder and continued to sleep listlessly. When Chen Shi saw her unlucky appearance, he could not help but pinch her little face, and then took a crystal bun and waved it in front of her eyes. "Awoo!" With delicious food in front of her, the little fellow finally became energetic and stretched out her neck to take a bite. But at this time, Chen Shi suddenly retracted his hand, making her bite empty air. The little fellow pouted and was about to be unhappy. Chen Shi hurriedly stuffed the bun into her mouth. "Is it delicious?" "Delicious." When the bun entered her mouth, there was a strong fragrance. She was also greedy. She bit off more than half of it in one bite. Her mouth was like a hamster's mouth, round and very cute. "Eat slowly, don't choke." Qin Ruing touched her head, then put her on the chair and let her eat. At this time, Chen Shi's phone suddenly rang. He picked up the phone and saw that it was a call from Gu Lao. "Gu Lao? Boss Qin, why are you not open today?" "Hey." The child slept in and delayed the opening. "Please wait a moment, we will come right away." "Okay, then we will wait outside for a while." Today, the little fellow got up too late. The old man came with the twins, but the tea house was not open yet. So he called to ask about the situation. Chen Shi thought that it was not good to let the old man and the children stand outside in the cold wind on this cold day, so he left to open the door for them. The retired old man's life was indeed very leisurely. Basically, he would come to have a cup of tea when he had nothing to do. It was not that the tea was delicious, but because the children could find something to play here. He did not have to worry about them, so he was happy to be leisurely. Chapter 168. Morning, 11:20. After breakfast, when the mother and daughter came to the tea house, Chen Shi was already playing Go with Gu Lao, and the brothers were also piling up blocks in the children's playground. As soon as Qin Ruing put down the little fellow, she ran over and greeted the brothers with a smile. It had only been a day since they last saw each other, but the three little things were like long-lost old friends. After happily greeting the little fellow, the brother immediately shouted for her to come in. They were studying how to make a transformer with blocks. Seeing this, the little fellow immediately took off her shoes, plopped down on the mat, and then crawled to the brothers on all fours. Because of yesterday's experience, the little fellow was very proud today. After sitting for a while, she asked the brothers to guess where she went to play yesterday. The brothers' situation was similar to hers before. Their parents were not around all year round, so they rarely went out to play. Hearing the little fellow showing off her experience yesterday, the two brothers immediately opened their small mouths and their faces were full of envy. "It's much bigger than here. Dinosaurs. And mazes. Sisos. And so many children. There's everything. I'll take you to play next time." In the end, the little fellow did not forget to pat her chest and promise that she would definitely call the brothers together in the future, which immediately attracted the two brothers' agreement. She was showing off unscrupulously, but Qin Ruing shook his head. As long as a child has something fun and novel, they can't help but show it off. This is human nature. Nian Nian didn't have many toys before, so she was very envious of the brothers' toys. When she has toys that others don't have, she will naturally take them out to win the envy and recognition of others. At this time, Toys have lost the meaning of toys, but become a tool for comparison, showing off, and not admitting defeat. Therefore, parents often see children arguing over toys, comparing whose toys are more fun and who has more toys. Everyone wants to be excellent. A healthy competitive spirit can promote a child's comprehensive and healthy development and make the child better. However, the competitive spirit can't be too strong or have no direction. If it goes in the wrong direction, it will be counterproductive. If the parents didn't guide them in the right way, the competitive spirit could very well turn into vanity. Vanity was a character flaw caused by excessive pursuit of vanity. It was also a distorted self-esteem. Even adults could not escape the clutches of vanity, let alone children. Qin Ruing sat at the bar and was thinking about how to set up good values for the little fellow when the door of the tea house was suddenly pushed open. It was a mother and her daughter. The woman was in her early 30s, and she was dressed very gracefully and luxuriously. However, the most eye-catching thing was the little girl beside her. The little girl looked only 1 or 2 years older than Yan. At such a young age, he was wearing a Dior fur coat that was priced at tens of thousands, and he was carrying a Balenciaga bag in his hand. Just this outfit alone would cost at least 100,000 yuan. Children grew up quickly. Many of the clothes bought this year could not be worn next year. Therefore, by the time this winter was over and the next winter came, the 100,000 yuan would probably be gone. She was really rich and capricious. The woman stood at the door and looked at the layout of the tea house. After finding that only Qin Shi and Gu Lao were here, she walked into the tea house with her daughter. Because Qin Shi and Gu Lao sat on the right side of the door, the woman sat directly on the left side. She was a guest. Qin Shi and Gu Lao were playing chess, so Qin Ruing came out from behind the bar and went directly to the woman and asked, "Hello? Do you need something to drink?" The woman took off her coat and motioned the child to sit inside. After hearing Qin Ruing's words, she picked up the price list on the table and looked at it. "Wui de Hong Pao?" The woman looked at the price list and suddenly couldn't help but mutter, but her tone was somewhat like ridicule. Although her voice was low, Qin Ruing, who was standing next to her, heard every word. Qin Ruing did not respond and pretended not to hear. The woman thought for a moment. After putting the price list back on the table, she said with a little helplessness, "Biluakun." "Okay, please wait a moment." Qin Ruing turned around to make tea for her. At this time, the little girl that the woman brought with her noticed the children's playground in the corner. When she saw the 3 little guys inside, she immediately raised her head and said to the woman with some excitement, "Mommy, can I go and play?" After saying that, the girl pointed to the children's playground. The woman had already heard the movement over there. After thinking for a moment, she said to the girl, "Good girl, don't go. You don't even know them. What if they bully you?" Hearing this, the little girl immediately pouted. It seemed that she was unhappy. Seeing this, the woman quickly hugged the child into her arms and comforted her, "We'll go home in a while. Mommy will play with you, okay?" The little girl shook her head and immediately turned her head to the window, showing a posture that said she didn't want to talk to her. The woman had no choice but to turn her head and look at the children's playground again before saying to the girl, "Then you go and play, okay?" Hearing that her mother agreed, the little girl immediately climbed over her lap happily and then ran to the children's playground. The woman still wanted to say something, but seeing her daughter's excited look, she could only let her go. At this time, Qin Ruing came over with a teacup and a kettle. After she put down the teacup and the kettle, the woman said to Qin Ruing, "The child wants to play with them. Is it okay?" "It's okay. The more people there are, the more lively it will be." Qin Ruing replied with a smile. She then turned around and returned to the bar counter. The woman seemed to be a little worried. After thinking for a moment, she picked up her coat and sat in the booth closest to the children's playground with a teacup. The little girl came to the fence and glanced at the 3 little guys who were lying on the ground stacking blocks. Then she asked a little nervously, "Can I play with you?" Hearing this, Nyan immediately raised her head and grinned, "Okay. But you have to take off your shoes before you can come in." But after getting Nyan's approval, the little girl immediately took off her shoes and walked in. But after she came in, she found that she couldn't find a seat. The three little guys each sat in a direction with the building block castle as the center. The two brothers were lying on the ground with their buttocks raised high, so they took up a lot of space, making it impossible for her to squeeze in. Seeing this, the little guy immediately patted the two brothers, indicating that they should make room for her. "You guys make way. There's no space." The two brothers were thinking about how to arrange the castle's gate. Hearing the little guy's words, they finally came back to their senses and quickly squeezed out a seat for the little girl. After the little girl sat down, the little guy, as the host, immediately took out a pile of building blocks and placed them in front of her. "My name is Chen Yen. You can call me Nyen Yen." Chapter 169. Nyen Tian Tian, Wen Wen Ming Ming. The four little ones squeezed in the children's playground. With more people, it suddenly became very lively. There were only enough Lego blocks to build 2 castles. Originally, the two brothers would have one set and Yen Yen would have one set. After Tian Tian came, the little one gave her half, but this made it impossible for her to build a complete castle. Tian Tian seemed to have never played with Lego blocks before. She was so clumsy that she could not even build a house. When the little one saw this, she immediately went to her side and stretched out her hand to command, "You should put this here, put this here. Here, and here." Under the little one's command, a small castle finally slowly appeared in front of Tian Tian. In order to make Tian Tian happy, the little one even dismantled her half-built castle and gave all the Lego blocks to her. While the little one was instructing Tian Tian to build the castle, the two brothers opposite were busy with their transformers. The Lego blocks were assembled with blueprints. Although the brothers did not understand the blueprints, this did not hinder their work. After being busy for a while, a transformer with clumsy hands and feet finally appeared in front of them. "Sister, look, Optimus Prime." The older brother patted the little one proudly. When the little one saw this, she immediately lay on the ground and carefully observed the transformer. However, at this time, the younger brother corrected her, "Sister, this is Megatron." "It's Optimus Prime." "It's Megatron." "Optimus Prime." "I made it." "It's Optimus Prime." "Megatron." "I taught you to make it." "This is Megatron." The two brothers almost fought over the naming rights of the Transformers. When the little one saw this, she immediately shouted, "Stop arguing. This is a gorilla." She had never seen a Transformer before, so she did not know what Optimus Prime and Decepticon were. The big guy in front of her looked no different from the gorillas she saw in the zoo before, so she decided to name this model. Gorilla is better than Megatron. Better than Optimus Prime. It was impossible for the twins not to bicker. The little fellow was too lazy to pay attention to them. Instead, she climbed to the gorilla's side and began to use her imagination. She picked up the building blocks and kept adding things to the gorilla. Seeing this, the two brothers were also unwilling to fall behind. They picked up the building blocks one after another and covered it with them. The three little fellows went back and forth, and in just a short while, they formed a completely indescribable monster. Looking at their masterpiece, the three of them couldn't help but laugh out loud. Tian Tian glanced at them, then lowered her head to look at the castle in front of her. Then, for some reason, she suddenly reached out and pushed down the castle that she had painstakingly built. Because the castle made of Lego bricks was not so easily damaged, she used both hands and tore the castle into pieces in a short while. The three little fellows were stunned. After she tore down the castle, the little fellow seemed to have returned to her senses. She asked curiously, "You don't like castles?" "I don't." After saying that, Tian Tian threw the building blocks in her hand, directly hitting the two brothers' mutant gorillas. The building blocks hit the gorilla and then bounced onto the mat. The little fellow looked down at the building blocks that she threw out. After pondering for a while, she sat up and said to the two brothers, "Let's play marbles?" The two brothers had no objections, so they immediately nodded and said, "Okay." Because they often came here to play, they put all the marbles here. After hearing the little fellow's words, the two brothers eagerly found a box of marbles in the corner. At this time, the little fellow looked at Tian Tian and asked, "Do you know how to play marbles?" Tian Tian shook her head. Seeing this, The little fellow introduced the rules of the game to her. After many days of research, the rules of the marbles game had been comprehensively upgraded. Using the building blocks, the three little fellows invented a game similar to billiards. First, they used the building blocks to circle an area as a field, then each person put 3 marbles in the field. In front of them would be a goal made of building blocks. As long as they used the mother bullet to knock the opponent's marble into the goal, even if they scored 1 point, they could still win the marble. Whoever lost all their marbles first would lose the game. Tian had never seen this kind of game, so she was immediately attracted to it. There was a standard posture for playing marbles. Using the index finger to circle the marbles and the thumb to push outward, the marbles would fly fast and accurately. After teaching Tian the posture, the 4 people began the game of marbles. Ever since the little fellow learned how to play marbles, she had always been the biggest winner. It was not that her skills were superior, but because the 2 brothers would always argue first and use all their skills to defeat each other, so the little fellow always got a big advantage. Now, the 2 brothers were arguing again. The older brother took the lead and directly hit the younger brother's marbles to the side of the goal, almost hitting the target. Seeing this, the little fellow decisively chose to hit the younger brother's marbles directly into the goal, and she was the first to get a point. It was Tian's turn. She looked left and right and chose the marbles that looked easier to hit the older brother. After looking for a while, Tian hit the marbles in her hand. Unfortunately, her skills were too poor, so the marbles that looked easy to hit missed because she missed the opportunity. The older brother escaped and immediately counterattacked with a laugh, immediately hitting Tian's marbles. Although he did not hit the target, he hit Tian's marbles to the side of the goal. The younger brother was also a veteran, so he naturally would not miss such a good opportunity, so he decisively chose to put down the grudge between him and his older brother and turned to attack Tian. Tian's marbles were successfully pocketed by him. Seeing that she had inexplicably lost a marbles, Tian immediately pouted. Unfortunately, her skills were too poor, and she always missed when she wanted to counterattack. The game continued. In a short while, the little fellow each got a marbles from the 2 brothers, and the 2 brothers each got a marbles from Tian. On the field, Nian still had 3 marbles, the brothers had 2 each, and the unlucky Tian only had 1 left. Seeing that Tian seemed to be a little unhappy, the little fellow put one of her marbles in front of her and said to her, "You just played, this is for you." Hearing this, Tian frowned and immediately returned the marbles to the little fellow, then pouted and said, "I don't want it, I want to win it back myself." After saying that, she picked up the marbles and seriously aimed at them. Looking at her, it seemed that she wanted to rely on her own strength to win back the marbles. Seeing that she did not want it, the little fellow did not care about her anymore. She lay on the ground and began to compete with the 2 brothers again. Tian was a newbie, so the 2 brothers did not hit her last marbles again, but fought with each other. However, when the little fellow hit another marbles, the older brother could not help but panic, because he only had 1 marbles left. The older brother looked at the field and found that Tian's marbles were the easiest to hit, so he directly aimed at Tian's marbles. After all, he was about to be eliminated, so he naturally did not want to be modest to the newbie. The marbles collided with each other, making a crisp sound. Immediately after that, Tian's last marbles were hit into the goal. "I hit it. This one is mine." The older brother sat up excitedly. However, just as he was about to reach out to pick up the marbles in front of Tian suddenly burst into tears. This sudden turn of events shocked the 3 little fellows. Chapter 170. Tian's sudden cry shocked everyone. Just like the weather in June, 1 second the sun was shining brightly, and the next second a thunderstorm was brewing. It was really unpredictable and impossible to figure out. The older brother was also shocked. He quickly put the marble back in front of Tian and comforted her. "Don't cry. I'll return the marble to you." However, Tian did not care at all. She continued to cry her heart out. The moment the woman heard her cry, she stood up from the card seat in a panic. She quickly walked over to the railing and saw Tiantian crying miserably on the cushion. Her expression changed and she rushed to Tiantian's side. Darling, what's wrong? Did they bully you? Don't cry. Tell mommy. Mommy will help you. The woman pulled Tiantian into her arms and comforted her softly. When the older brother saw this, he immediately defended himself. We didn't bully her. The younger brother also echoed. We were playing a marble game just now. We didn't bully her. She was the one who cried all of a sudden. Although the brothers often bickered with each other, they were not careless at all when they needed to work together to deal with outsiders. Tiantian was crying miserably. When she saw the woman coming over, she immediately threw herself into her arms. The woman comforted her for a while. When she saw that Tiantian could not stop crying, she glared at the brothers fiercely. At this moment, the little boy could not stand it anymore. He quickly explained, Auntie, we didn't bully Tiantian. We were playing a game. She was so angry that she cried when she lost. The woman's attitude made the brothers feel very wronged. After hearing Yan Yan's words, the older brother immediately pouted and muttered, That's right. She couldn't afford to lose. The younger brother felt that this matter had nothing to do with him, so he immediately made a face at Tiantian and laughed. That's right. Tiantian couldn't afford to lose. Shame, shame, shame. The younger brother's actions were not malicious. On the contrary, he had good intentions. This was because when they played games in the past, if one of them could not afford to lose and cried, everyone would use this method to stop him from crying and provoke the other party's competitive spirit. This was a common method of provocation between children. However, in the woman's eyes, this was a malicious provocation, so she immediately exploded. Whose child are you? Don't you have any manners? Didn't your parents teach you how to get along with other children? The woman pointed at the two brothers and scolded them. The elder brother was frightened. He sat on the cushion and didn't even dare to raise his head. But his younger brother was not happy. He straightened his neck and shouted at the woman, We didn't bully her. It was she who couldn't afford to lose. Can't afford to lose. The younger brother's expression was also extremely aggrieved. At this moment he was like little Hachi who would rather die than submit, vowing to fight the evil forces to the end. If he didn't, then he didn't. His honest brother would never take the blame for this kind of thing. This time, the woman was really infuriated by him. Because she was squatting in front of the two brothers, when she heard her brother's words, she immediately raised her right hand and slapped her brother's face. Her brother had never thought that this woman would hit him. But fortunately, this slap was stopped by Qin Ruing in time. Qin Ruing had just come over, but she stood aside and didn't say anything. Seeing that the woman was about to hit her brother, she naturally couldn't sit back and do nothing. They're still children. It's normal for children to have a little friction. As a parent, directly intervening will only cause a bigger conflict. After stopping the woman's slap, Qin Ruing frowned and added, That's not good. It was inevitable that there would be friction between children. Which child hadn't fought when they were young? So when a parent faced this problem, it was best to follow the 3 no's principle. Don't be angry, don't intervene, and don't be afraid of being taken advantage of. This seemingly negative attitude was the most basic, simplest, and most effective way to cultivate healthy relationships between children. Children would be angry, but they would never hold a grudge. If a parent immediately intervened when a child had a little friction, this behavior was destructive in itself. It seemed like meticulous care, but in fact, it would deprive the child of the experience of real life, resulting in the child's lack of experience of setbacks. It would make their ability to resist pressure extremely poor, and their psychological endurance would also weaken. Just because Tiantian cried, the woman directly judged that the two brothers had bullied Tiantian. This simple and crude way of thinking would not help a child's growth at all. Instead, it would harm her. In name, it was love, but in fact, it was harm. When the two brothers saw Qin Ruing coming, it was as if they had found a backer. The older brother immediately pursed his little mouth and cried as well. Tiantian would cry, and so would he. However, the younger brother still had the spirit of a man. He stared back at the angry woman without fear. We didn't bully Tiantian. The younger brother kept muttering this sentence. This was the source of his courage. Grandpa always said that people should walk and stand upright. If they didn't bully Tian Tian, then they didn't. At this time, the little girl also stood up. She tugged at the corner of Qin Ruing's clothes across the fence, then pouted and muttered, "Mama, we really didn't bully Tian Tian. Good girl." Qin Ruing rubbed the little girl's head, then said to the two brothers, "You two apologize to Tian Tian." She didn't know what had happened, but looking at Tian Tian's aggrieved appearance, she guessed that a child wouldn't cry for no reason. So, it was obvious that these three little guys had made her cry for some reason. In this case, an apology was necessary. When the little girl heard her mother say so, she thought for a moment and said directly, "Tian, I'm sorry. Don't cry." Then, the older brother also stopped crying under the comfort of Qin Ruing. Then, he said with a little grievance, "I'm sorry." It was the younger brother's turn. When Qin Ruing motioned for the younger brother to apologize to Tian Tian, the younger brother fell silent. He sat on the cushion, lowered his head, and no one knew what he was thinking. Qin Ruing gently touched his head, motioning for him to calm down. But at this time, the younger brother suddenly seemed to be provoked by something. He stood up and shouted, "We didn't bully her. Why should we apologize? I didn't do anything wrong. I won't apologize. I won't apologize." With that, the younger brother suddenly stood up from the cushion and rushed out of the children's park. Qin Ruing wanted to stop him, but she didn't dare to use too much force, so he broke free at once. As he ran, the younger brother suddenly burst into tears. Because he really felt wronged, tears blurred his eyes, but the younger brother still found the right direction by feeling. He wanted to rush out of the tea house barefooted. At this time, a figure suddenly appeared at the door of the tea house, blocking the younger brother's way. Then, the younger brother felt his body suddenly light, as if he was flying. The younger brother quickly wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes, only to find that it was Qin Shi who had picked him up. "Let go of me." The younger brother shook left and right hard, wanting Qin Shi to put him down. Looking at the stubborn little thing in front of him, Qin Shi couldn't help laughing. Reaching out and pinching the younger brother's angry and aggrieved face, Qin Shi carried him back to the children's park. Chapter 171. Gu Lao was sitting in the booth with a smile. Although his grandson was so angry that he cried, he was not in a hurry at all. He seemed to want to see how Qin Shi would deal with this matter. The younger brother usually looked silly, but if he was really forced, this child's character would be very strong. The older brother was much more tactful than the younger brother, or rather, he was more clever. So even if he felt wronged, he would choose to compromise in order to keep the peace. Although they were twins, they had completely different personalities. The younger brother's character was easy to be taken advantage of, but he was very likable. Others didn't know, but Qin Shi liked him very much. An honest young man was very much to his taste. Qin Ruing didn't know what had happened just now, so she asked the three little guys to apologize to Tian Tian. Qin Shi was sitting far away and was still playing chess with Gu Lao. But with his 5 senses, how could he not know what was going on between these little fellows? It was all because of that woman's pampering that she raised a spoiled little princess. She had been surrounded by the whole world since she was a child. She would lose her temper if she was slightly neglected, not to mention that the two brothers had won 3 marbles from her. Although she was a newbie, she didn't have the awareness of a newbie. It was good to be competitive, but it was bad to have no self-awareness. She cried at the slightest thing and lost her temper at the slightest dissatisfaction. Even Yin Yin was not as delicate as her. Of course, Tian Tian couldn't be blamed for this. She could only blame her mother who always held her in the palm of her hand. It was just a small matter, but she, as a parent, had to get involved. Suddenly, the nature of the whole thing changed. The younger brother was very reluctant to go. When he saw Qin Shi carrying him to the children's playground, he immediately became excited. "Let go of me. I want to go down. I want Grandpa." The younger brother struggled to twist his body, but Qin Shi didn't pay attention to him at all. After carrying him to Qin Ruing, he put him back on the cushion. The younger brother glanced at Tian Tian and her mother and wanted to run away. But at this time, Chen Shi grabbed him by the collar and dragged him back to the children's playground. After blocking the entrance of the children's amusement park and not letting his brother out, Chen Shi asked Tian Tian, who was hiding in the woman's arms, "Tian Tian, did they bully you?" Tian Tian had already stopped crying. Her teary eyes really looked like she had suffered a great grievance. After hearing Chen Shi's words, Tian Tian didn't answer. Instead, she turned around and leaned into the woman's arms. "Tian Tian, answer me. Did they bully you?" Chen Shi asked again. However, Tian Tian still didn't say anything. Instead, she leaned on the woman's shoulder and didn't even turn her head. The woman felt her body tremble slightly and thought that she was frightened, so she immediately frowned and said to Chen Shi, "What are you doing? Can't you see that the child is still crying?" Chen Shi ignored the ignorant woman and continued to ask, "Tianan, if they bullied you just now, just nod and I will beat their butts now. Okay?" Hearing this, the woman's expression softened. She felt that Chen Shi's attitude was very good, so she said to Tian Tian, "Tian, tell mommy, did they bully you? Don't be afraid, mommy will protect you." Tian Tian still didn't answer. But at this time, the little girl couldn't stand it anymore. She stood up from the climbing mat, pointed at Tian, and said loudly, "Papa, we didn't bully her." Now, not only did her brother feel wronged, but even the little girl felt a little wronged. Like her brother, she didn't understand why the adults didn't believe them. With Qin Ruoying's understanding of Chen Shi, she understood something after thinking for a while. She knew that Chen Shi must have a deep meaning, so she quickly hugged the little girl across the fence and whispered to her, "Nian Nian, don't worry, listen to what Daddy has to say." The little girl was angry and pouted unhappily. Chen Shi didn't know why, but he kept asking Tian Tian, "Tianan, did they bully you?" There seemed to be a magic in his voice. After repeating this over and over again, Tian Tian finally couldn't hold it in any longer and burst into tears again. Then she cried and sobbed in a low voice, "They didn't bully me." "Louder, I didn't hear you clearly." Chen Shi's voice was a little harsh. At this moment, Tian Tian finally raised her head to look at him, and then cried out with a sobbing tone, "No, they didn't bully me." Hearing this answer, Chen Shi couldn't help but nod in satisfaction. It was good that she could answer honestly, which meant that the child could still be saved. However, after hearing Tian Tian's sobbing voice, the woman couldn't take it anymore. Thus, she immediately stood up from the ground and pointed at Chen Shi angrily, "You have to threaten such a young child, are you still human?" The child was clearly suffering a great grievance. The man in front of her seemed to be seeking justice for Tian Tian, but in fact, he was threatening the child. There were only the mother and daughter here, and under his repeated questioning, the child was clearly frightened, so she didn't dare to say that she was bullied. The woman was very angry. However, Chen Shi was amused by her strange logic. "I threatened her? Didn't you hear what she said? If you didn't threaten her, would she say that? No wonder your child bullied others. As parents, you're not human." At this moment, Chen Shi felt like 10,000 alpacas were running through him. The child could still be saved, but as a mother, she couldn't be saved. At this time, Qin Ruoying seemed to want to say something, but Chen Shi stopped her in time. He was not a saint, and he had his own temper. The woman in front of him had broken through the limit and was purely pestering him. Since she was being unreasonable, Chen Shi naturally wouldn't be polite to her. "Get lost, you're not welcome here." Hearing this, the woman couldn't help but be stunned. Then she laughed angrily, pointed at Chen Shi and shouted, "You told me to get lost? Good, very good, very good." Because she was so angry, the woman's face was flushed red, and her body was trembling slightly. After looking at Chen Shi deeply, she casually wiped the tears on Tian Tian's face. Then, she picked up Tian Tian and walked out of the children's playground angrily. "Hey, Tian Tian's shoes are here." Chen Shi pointed at Tian Tian's shoes kindly. However, to the woman, it sounded like mockery. So, the woman finally couldn't help but say fiercely, "Just you wait." After saying that, she rushed out of the tea house with Tian Tian without even taking her shoes. After seeing Tian Tian and her mother leave, The unhappiness on the little girl's face turned into anxiety. After hesitating for a moment, she walked to Qinshi's side, tugged at Qinshi's clothes, and said timidly, "Papa, I'm sorry." When the younger brother saw this, he immediately came to Qinshi's side and said in a low voice, "Uncle, I'm sorry." The older brother was a little confused, but he immediately stood up from the ground and said, "Uncle, I'm sorry." The couple couldn't help but look at each other and laugh. Qianxi reached out to touch the heads of the three little girls and said to them solemnly, "You didn't do anything wrong, but you have to remember, in the future, don't be like Tian, who doesn't dare to admit her mistakes, because she will not only harm herself, but also others. Do you understand?" Chapter 172. A child's joy, anger, sorrow, and joy were all real. A momentary outburst of emotion came and went quickly. After the three little guys saw that Qinshi was not angry, they immediately sat down in the children's playground and started playing again. As for Tiantian, obviously, they had forgotten about her. The couple looked at each other and had a more intuitive feeling about the importance of educating children. It was called love, but it was actually harm. The little guy's experience was somewhat similar to the brothers. They lacked the love of their parents since they were young, and Aunt Zhang and Gu Lao were quite strict. They never let the children mess around, so they developed an obedient and sensible personality. Tiantian's parents spoiled her too much, so she would immediately turn hostile and throw tantrums when she was unhappy. After all, she was not a prostitute, so society would teach her a truth sooner or later. She was not the sun, so no one would revolve around her forever. The annoying guy left, and the tea house was quiet again. Qianxi was about to go back to play chess with Gu Lao, but at this moment, his phone suddenly rang. The caller was Qin Xueqing. He passed the screen in front of Qin Ruoying so that she could take a look. Then he answered the call. "Hello, Qin. It's me." After hearing Qinshi's voice, Qin Xueqing's voice sounded from the other end of the phone. Qinshi thought she had something to say, so he did not speak. But after waiting for a while, there was no sound from the other end of the phone. So, Qinshi had to frown and ask, "What's wrong? What's the matter?" "Nothing, I just want to tell you that I have a new task recently, so I won't be back for the time being." "Oh, okay," Qinshi nodded. Just as she was about to say something, the phone rang with a beep-beep sound from the other end of the line. Qin Xueqing hung up the phone. Qinshi felt that she was a bit inexplicable. After putting away the phone, he turned to Qin Ruoying and said, "Qin said that she's very busy recently, so she won't be back for the time being." And? That's all. That's really her character. Seeing Qinshi's helpless look, Qin Ruoying couldn't help but smile. Meanwhile, after Qin Xueqing hung up the phone, she looked down at the satellite photos in her hand. This was a sub-meter-level high-resolution satellite image, and the first photo was of the Meimen ruins. At this moment, Meimen was like a giant crater that had been smashed by a meteor. Everything around it had been reduced to nothingness. The explosion was comparable to a magnitude 4 earthquake. The moment the explosion occurred, it had already shocked the entire world. Qinshi would automatically shield his whereabouts when he was flying, so there was no way for the satellite to capture his figure. But that didn't stop them from investigating. Thanks to Qinshi, Qin Xueqing was now famous. As long as it was a member of the Martial Arts Alliance, there was almost no one who did not recognize this beautiful woman with a broken arm. She was Xian Nu, and Xian Nu's wish was to become a Wu Dao Grandmaster. Therefore, under the careful cultivation of the village, Qin Xueqing's martial arts cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds. 2 years ago, she had already reached the peak of transforming strength, but because she had been unable to break through, Qin Xueqing chose to join the Wu Lian, trying to find a breakthrough through actual combat and step into the gang realm in one fell swoop. The young and beautiful transforming strength grandmaster attracted a lot of attention at that time. Everyone knew that Director Qin, who was parachuted into the emergency department, had a strong background. But it wasn't until she had a broken hand that everyone finally realized how strong her background was. She was a celestial being. Qin Xueqing had failed the hunting mission and lost a hand because of it. At that time, Many people were waiting to see her make a fool of herself. But they didn't expect that she had found a great master from somewhere who took her all the way to the Golden Triangle. After rescuing the hostages, they also flattened the place. Because of that, when Qin Xueqing returned to Beijing to report on her work, no matter who saw her, they would respectfully greet her, Director Qin. They couldn't afford to offend her. Qin Xueqing's status in the Wu Lian rose sharply. At that time, she learned a not-so-secret. The village was also flattened. To be honest, Qin Xueqing didn't have such a big reaction even when Qin Shi killed great-uncle in front of her. But after hearing the news from the leader, Qin Xueqing was so shocked that she didn't come to her senses for a long time. After all, the village was almost a holy place in her mind. This holy place of inheritance that had existed for countless years was completely turned into ruins because of Qin Shi's appearance. The village used to have a well-known name, All Saints Valley. There had long been a rumor that there were many inheritances in Huaxia, and the All Saints Valley occupied 3 of them. In the battle between the Immortal generals, the village was affected by the power of the 2 and completely turned into ruins. Before Qin Shi left, he killed the few remaining elders in the village. The village was destroyed, and the elders were also dead. Without a leader, the Wu Lian extended an olive branch to the villagers, so most of the villagers chose to join the Wu Lian with their inheritances. The Wu Lian also became the biggest beneficiary. If a butterfly flapped its wings in Brazil, would it cause a tornado in Texas? This seemingly absurd question was the famous butterfly effect theory. At this moment, Qin Shi was like the butterfly flapping its wings in Brazil. He didn't know what kind of storm his big move would set off in the world. Of course, even if he knew, he wouldn't care. The small tea house by Hohai Lake was still open for business. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Gu Lao was ready to take the brothers home after this game. But at this moment, 2 GL8s blocked the entrance of the tea house. Then, a group of people got out of the car. When Qin Shi heard the movement outside, he turned his head and couldn't help but sigh. He said helplessly, "It hasn't even been a month since it opened, and my tea house is already being smashed twice." Gu Lao also turned his head and looked outside the window. He frowned and said, "Should we call the police?" "It's fine, take a seat, I'll go out and take a look." After that, Qin Shi walked out of the booth with a smile. Qin Shi walked to the door and was about to push the door open when he suddenly thought of something. He quickly turned around and shouted at Qin Ring, "Call the police." Qin Ruoying couldn't help but roll her eyes. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She replied, "Be quiet, don't scare the kid again." Last time, Wang Hao's group smashed the window and scared the little girl. If they did it again, she would probably be traumatized. The 2 GL8s blocked the entrance of the tea house. This time was a little different from last time. Last time, Wang Hao's group came for Qiao Yuan, but this time, they came for Qin Shi. Therefore, as soon as Qin Shi walked out of the tea house, Tian Tian's mother saw him. Chapter 173. Outside the tea house, a group of people got out of the car. Tian Tian's mother was obviously the leader of the group, and next to her stood a man in his 40s. Tian Tian's mother was called Li Lu, and she used to be a small-time actress. After marrying into a rich family, she stopped acting and became a rich lady at home. She basically only had to take care of her child every day. When Li Lu saw Qin Shi walk out, she immediately became excited. "Honey, it's him." Her husband's name was Zhou Haixing, and he was the boss of a real estate company in Jizhou. There were 7 or 8 people standing behind Zhou Haixing, and they were all Zhou Haixing's subordinates. They were all older, and the youngest of them was at least 30 years old. Including Zhou Haixing, they were all dressed in a very mature manner, and most of them were dressed in dark business suits. Just by standing there, he naturally gave people a sense of stability. In addition to their mature temperament, there was also a faint aura of power around them. Aura was a very mysterious thing. If Wang Hao was standing in front of this group of people, he would be so scared that he wouldn't dare to look them in the eye. This group of people was now a proper company employee, but who didn't have a past? Zhou Haixing was from Zhonghai. When he was young, he relied on his courage to fight to become a mine manager in a mine in Inner Mongolia. Later, when there was a boom in contracting coal mines, Zhou Haixing used some means to contract a medium-sized coal mine in Jizhou, and thus earned a large amount of startup capital. Zhou Haixing was the type of person who had foresight. He knew that the mining and energy business wouldn't last long, so he transitioned into the real estate industry a long time ago. Mining, energy, and real estate were the two most profitable industries in China. Those who could carve out a bloody path in these industries were all trendsetters of the times. Zhou Haixing was indeed very powerful, but unfortunately, he wasn't a rich second generation. This also caused his scope to be limited. Even if he became a real estate mogul with status and identity in Jizhou, Zhou Haixing was still limited to Jizhou and couldn't continue to expand. He started from scratch and got to where he was now. He was already someone that many people looked up to. However, Zhou Haixing wasn't satisfied and always wanted to go further. The appearance of Xiong and New District gave Zhou Haixing hope, so in the past year, he would go to Shangjing whenever he had nothing to do. However, the waters in Shangjing were too deep. In Jizhou, he was a big shot who could cover the sky with one hand, but in Shangjing, it was difficult for him to move forward. It took Zhou Haixing more than half a year before he finally found a high-end route. However, even though the connection was made, there was no progress in the matter. In Zhou Haixing's words, those people were bastards who only took money but didn't do anything. Moreover, he couldn't afford to offend them. During this period of time, Zhou Haixing had been acting like a grandson to curry favor with others all day long, so he had been suppressing a stomach full of resentment. When he suddenly heard that his wife and child were being bullied, how could he sit still? So, after receiving the call, he immediately rushed over with his men. Before coming to the tea house, Li Lu had already told Zhou Haixing the whole story with exaggerated details. At that time, Zhou Haixing had exploded with anger. It was true that the waters in Shangjing were deep, but it wasn't to the extent that any Tom, Dick, and Harry could jump in front of him. If a tiger didn't show its might, would they really think that it was a sick cat? Therefore, when he heard that Li Lu had identified the young man in front of him as the culprit who bullied her and her mother, Zhou Haixing immediately frowned. He looked at Qin Shi from head to toe, then glanced at the small tea house. Although Sijio City was big, one of the families by the sea might be related to a big shot. After all, Zhou Haixing was a fierce dragon crossing the river, so he was very cautious in his actions. Therefore, after pondering for a while, he turned around and pulled Li Lu into the GL8. Li Lu was pushed into the car by Zhou Haixing in a daze. When she came back to her senses, she struggled to get down. "What are you doing? I was bullied. Aren't you going to stand up for me?" "Shut up. Sit here and don't move." Zhou Haixing was already in a bad mood. When he saw that this woman was being so insensible, he was instantly furious. He pushed Li Lu back to her seat, then turned around and said to the people outside the car, "Just a simple lesson, a small punishment, a big warning." After saying that, he pulled the car door shut. This group of people had been with him since the days of the mine. They were able to survive from that era, so naturally, they were the number one figures who had been through a lot. What Zhou Haixing meant by a simple lesson was actually not to cripple them. After all, this was Shangjing. It would be fine if they stayed in the hospital for a month or so. These people were different from Wang Hao and the group of young people who only knew how to make a fuss. After hearing Zhou Haixing's words, a trace of ferocity flashed across their eyes. Without any pleasantries, the man standing closest to them directly rushed toward Qin Shi. He wanted to grab Qin Shi, but he did not expect that Qin Shi would grab his wrist first. Qin Shi glanced at him and then twisted his wrist. The man immediately let out a scream. His left hand was dislocated by Qin Shi just like that. To be honest, compared to using violence, Qin Shi preferred to reason with people. Unfortunately, they did not like to reason, however, since they chose to fight, Qin Shi did not hold back. When the man next to him saw that his brother was at a disadvantage, he immediately took out a switchblade from his waist. However, before the switchblade in his hand could stab over, Qin Shi had already slapped him in the face. He immediately fell to the ground and lay motionless on the ground. No one knew if he was dead or alive. "He's a martial artist. He's a martial artist." The remaining few people were scared out of their wits. They watched as Qin Shi walked straight to the GL8 as if he was going to look for Zhou Haixing. Therefore, after hesitating for a moment, they still rushed up like a swarm of bees. Just like Yao Ming in kindergarten, he could casually slap a group of children. Chen Shi also felt that it was pointless. After one slap, the remaining few people fell to the ground and cried out in pain. This time, he used his true essence, so these people did not even know how they fell. Zhou Haixing was still talking to Li Lu in the car. Suddenly, someone knocked on the car window. He turned his head and saw the young man smiling at him through the car window. Zhou Haixing instinctively wanted to lock the car door. However, at this time, the car door was directly pulled open by Qin Shi. Then a strong force came and immediately pulled Zhou Haixing out of the car and threw him directly to the ground. This unforeseen event came too suddenly. It was not until Zhou Haixing lay on the cold ground and looked at his men on the ground that he suddenly realized he had kicked an iron plate. Chen Shi ignored Li Lu, who was screaming in the car. After throwing Zhou Haixing to the ground, he stood directly next to Zhou Haixing and looked down at him condescendingly. However, just as Chen Shi was about to talk to this pair of naughty parents about how to raise their children, he suddenly noticed that someone had secretly approached the tea house. It was not an ordinary person who happened to be passing by, but a martial arts expert who was good at holding his breath. Chapter 174. The people Zhou Haixing brought were sprawled all over the ground. Even he himself was thrown to the ground by Chen Shi. It took him a long time to regain his senses. From the time he got into the car to when Chen Shi pulled him down, the time it took was less than 30 seconds. In less than 30 seconds, Zhou Haixing already experienced the feeling of being on a roller coaster. Could this be fate? Was it destined that everything would go wrong in Shangjing? His wife was bullied when she casually entered a tea house, and when he brought people back to get back at them, he found out that the other party was a martial arts expert that he could not afford to provoke. Zhou Haixing really had 800 lifetimes worth of bad luck. For ordinary people, the martial Dao was not an unattainable existence. After all, everything in this world depended on talent. Music, painting, singing, dancing, and all kinds of sports. Even playing games required talent. Some people could play for 3 months and reach the diamond rank, while others could only hover around the gold rank after playing for a few years. Zhou Haixing once wanted to practice martial arts, but he was not cut out for it, so he stopped after a year or two. It was because he had learned martial arts that he knew how powerful martial arts experts were. This was not Jizhou, this was Shangjing. No matter how powerful he was in Jizhou, he had to lower his head in Shangjing. Zhou Haixing lay on the ground, not daring to move, but his mind was quickly thinking about how to solve this problem. Qin Shi did not know about Zhou Haixing's psychological changes, he just wanted to have a good chat with this pair of naughty parents. But at this time, Chen Shi suddenly felt something strange. On the street outside the tea house, a man and a woman suddenly walked over. The two of them were about 30 years old and were dressed very casually. They looked like a couple who came to Hohai to play. The man was holding a phone and constantly taking pictures. Martial artists did not know how to be invisible like Qin Shi, so they could only use their breathing, movements, and muscle expressions to disguise themselves as ordinary people. But because of years of training, martial artists' footsteps were usually very light. Moreover, martial arts required martial artists to have precise control of their body, so every step they took, whether it was posture or distance, was almost the same as the previous step. This was muscle memory that could only be formed after a long period of training. It was precisely because of this that even though they had disguised themselves perfectly, they still couldn't escape Qin Shi's eyes. Another detail was that this man and woman were not a couple at all. Although they looked very intimate, when the two of them looked at each other, their eyes couldn't help but avoid each other's gaze. It was obvious that they were a fake couple who got together at the last minute. Chen Shi ignored Zhou Haixing. Instead, he stood at the entrance of the tea house and looked at the couple through the gap between the two GL8s. He just stared at the two of them. She watched them stroll from outside the bar to outside the tea house. Although the two of them tried their best to pretend as if nothing had happened and chatted casually, Being stared at by Chen Shi like this made them feel a strong pressure. They couldn't help but feel a little nervous. And because of their nervousness, their movements were slightly stiff. The woman didn't even dare to turn her head to look at the tea house, but this kind of behavior was simply giving herself away. There were so many people lying in front of the tea house. If they were ordinary people, how could they not turn around to take a look? The two of them slowly walked in front of the tea house. But at this moment, Chen Shi suddenly waved at the two of them and shouted, "You two, come here for a second." The woman was so scared that she almost jumped up on the spot. Seeing this, the man next to her put his arm around her and pulled her forward. Seeing that they were still acting, Chen Shi suddenly lost interest, so he said coldly, "I'll count to 3, 1, 2. Before the third count, the man seemed to have made a decision. He suddenly pulled the woman in front of Chen Shi. They pretended not to see the wounded people on the ground. After they came in front of Chen Shi, the two of them bowed and said, "Mr. Chen." Seeing that the two of them were no longer acting, Chen Shi couldn't help but nod in satisfaction. He asked, "Did the Wu Lian send you?" "Yes, Mr. Chen, we belong to the Wu Lian inspection office. This is my ID." The man didn't dare to look up. As he spoke, he took out an ID from his pocket and respectfully handed it to Chen Shi. Chen Shi thought for a moment, then asked thoughtfully, "How many days have you been here?" 3 days. Hearing this answer, Chen Shi couldn't help but shake his head and laugh. After his divine sense was damaged, he could only rely on his 5 senses to detect the movements around him. If it weren't for the fact that the tea house was smashed today, he probably wouldn't have been able to find the two of them. Being watched was always a bad experience, so Chen Shi thought for a moment, then frowned and asked, "Why are you watching me?" The man was silent. Seeing this, the woman couldn't help but nervously tug at the corner of his shirt. After the two of them quietly looked at each other, the man gritted his teeth and explained, "In Huaxia, all people above the master stage will be followed and observed by the inspector's office. Please forgive us for any inconvenience caused to you." "Oh? Wu Lian has such a rule? But are you afraid that martial arts masters will cause trouble everywhere?" Chen Shi asked casually. The man didn't answer Chen Shi's question, but lowered his head and repeated, "We're just following orders. Please forgive us for the inconvenience." The two of them obviously knew Chen Shi's strength. So even if Chen Shi didn't show any malice to them, they still felt a great deal of pressure. These two people were just small fries following orders, so Chen Shi didn't intend to make things difficult for them. After understanding the situation, Chen Shi said casually, "Okay, I got it. You can go." If he remembered correctly, his sister-in-law seemed to have a certain level in the Wu Lian. It seemed that he would have to call her later to ask. In fact, there was no need to ask at all. He could understand the Wu Lian's intention with just a little thought. Zongnanhai was not far to the south of Hohai. What if Chen Shi couldn't figure it out and went to Zongnanhai to have a go? If something really went wrong, no one would be able to bear the responsibility. Therefore, it was imperative to supervise the operation. To be honest, the Wu Lian didn't try to arrest Chen Shi, which was actually very polite. After hearing that they could leave, the two of them immediately breathed a sigh of relief. The woman turned to leave. But at this time, the man looked down at Zhou Haixing on the ground and asked, "Mr. Chen, do you need us to deal with it?" Zhou Haixing was not a young man who hadn't seen the world. When he heard the two words Wu Lian just now, he knew who he had provoked today. After listening to their conversation, Zhou Haixing was so scared that he lost all his strength. Wu Lian Inspection Office, masters above the master level. Just a few words were enough to make Zhou Haixing realize the seriousness of the matter. Chapter 175. For the sake of peace and quiet, Chen Shi thought for a moment, and then let the two people from the inspector's office take away the unlucky Zhou Haixing. As for where they were taking Zhou Haixing, that was not Chen Shi's concern. He only hoped that this setback would give the naughty parents a different understanding of life, so that they could lead Tian, who had almost gone astray, back to the right track. The child was not wrong, it was their parents who were wrong. Nowadays, everyone was equal. Their children were not made of gold, so how could they be more precious than other people's children? So what if they were rich and powerful? Other than Gao Li and Jean Pang Pang, who else in this world would dare to say that they were the number one rich second generation? Even Yin Yin was not as delicate as Tian Tian. Thinking of this, Chen Shi could not help but feel a strong sense of pride from the bottom of his heart. Looking at other people's children and then looking at his own, it was true that there was no harm without comparison. When Chen Shi returned to the tea house, Gu Lao immediately asked with a smile, "Have you practiced martial arts?" The old man had already seen what happened through the glass, so he asked this question. "A little bit, but I'm still considered a beginner." Chen Shi replied with a smile, not intending to hide it. Hearing this, Gu Lao pointed at him and laughed as if he was joking, "You are so open-minded." "Don't, you're flattering me, I can't accept this evaluation." The two of them could be considered friends despite the difference in age, so they would often joke around casually. When Chen Shi sat back in the booth and finished the unfinished game, Gu Lao was ready to leave with the two brothers. Before leaving, Gu Lao took out another 20 yuan. But under Chen Shi's strong opposition, Gu Lao finally took back the 20 yuan. He and Chen Shi did not lack the 20 yuan. It was only a cup of tea, so it was a bit strange to do this every day. Okay, let's make it clear, in the future, you can't say that this old man is shameless, coming here to drink tea all day. How could that be? You're too polite. After exchanging a few pleasantries with Chen Shi, Gu Lao told the two brothers to leave. The three little fellows had already gotten used to this rhythm. Therefore, when the two brothers heard Gu Lao's call, the elder brother pouted and said to the little girl, "Sister, I'll come and play with you tomorrow." The younger brother quickly added, "Me too." Alright. Looking at the two brothers who were about to leave, the little guy nodded heavily, his face full of reluctance. After changing their shoes, the two brothers ran to Gu Lao's side. Before they left, they didn't forget to turn back and wave at the little girl. "Goodbye, little sister. Goodbye." The winter in Shangjing was already cold, and it was still winter, so there were fewer and fewer guests. As soon as the two brothers left, the tea house immediately became deserted without the children's laughter. The little girl played alone in the children's playground for a while, but because she didn't have the company of the two brothers, she pouted and ran out after playing for a while. When Chen Shi saw her expression, he knew that she was a little depressed because there was no one to play with her. Therefore, Chen Shi picked up the little girl from the ground and threw her directly into the sky. His actions were too sudden, giving the little fellow a big fright. But when the little girl came back to her senses, she started to giggle. "Is it fun? It's fun. It's fun. Okay, then let's do it 2 more times." Qin Ring sat behind the bar and watched them play for a while, then asked with a smile, "It looks like there won't be any business. Do you want to close and go home?" Before Chen Shi could answer, the little girl who was still flying in the air immediately turned her head and shouted, "Go home. Go home." Chen Shi caught the little girl, kissed her on the face, and laughed. "Okay, let's go home." The tea house was closed. But before leaving, Chen Shi did not forget to set up a simple illusion array around. The trip to the Golden Triangle had completely exposed him. It was estimated that the Wu Lian people would peep at him with binoculars all day long. Although he didn't care, he didn't like to be peeped at. This incident also reminded Chen Shi that no matter where he went in the future, he had to hold his breath. Life finally returned to peace. Fame and fortune in life, but after death, they could only turn into a handful of yellow soil. Knowing how to live and learning to enjoy the happiness flowing in the plain life was the true meaning of life. What was happiness? Happiness was when cats eat fish, dogs eat meat, and Ultraman beat up small monsters. It seemed to be a simple and easy truth, but few people could really understand the essence of it. Another 2 days passed. Qin Xueqing still didn't come back. No one knew what she was busy with during this time. On this day, it was a rare sunny day. The bright sun made people unable to look directly at it. Under the reflection of the snow, the sun seemed to be a little brighter, illuminating the world and sweeping away the previous hazy darkness. The surface of Hohai Lake was sparkling. Standing under the sun, one couldn't help but feel a lot more relaxed. The weather was so good that Gu Lao brought the two brothers to the tea house early in the morning. However, he didn't come to play chess today. He had something to ask of Qin Shi. Gu Lao went on a long trip today and would only come back tomorrow. At this time in the past, Gu Lao would either bring the two brothers or send them to their mother. Now that he knew Qin Shi, he naturally didn't have to go through so much trouble. Because the two brothers had to stay with Qin Shi for a night, Gu Lao offered to give Qin Shi 200 yuan for living expenses, but Qin Shi decisively refused. It was okay to foster children, but giving money would be looking down on him. After several rejections, Gu Lao didn't insist anymore. He simply said a few words to the two brothers and then left in a hurry. Grandpa was going to leave them for a day, but there was no disappointment on the faces of the two brothers. Instead, there was excitement. In this regard, they were completely different from the little guy. Perhaps this was also an advantage brought by twins. The brothers' independence was obviously much stronger than the little guy. If Aunt Zhang wanted to foster the little guy to someone else for a night, the little guy's eyes would probably be swollen from crying. Today's weather was good. The three little guys stayed in the children's playground for a while. The older brother proposed to have a snowball fight outside. The little guy had already built a snowman, but he had never had a snowball fight. So when he heard that he wanted to have a snowball fight, he jumped up excitedly on the spot. In the winter, snowballs didn't hurt on the body, but it would be dangerous if they were hit on the head. Looking at the three little guys running out of the door, Qin Shi quickly asked Qin Ruing to watch them, and he quickly ran to buy helmets, gloves, and goggles for the three little guys. When the full set of equipment was ready, the three little guys started to have a snowball fight outside the tea house. A three-person melee was not fun, so under the organization of Qin Shi, they used snowballs to play sandbags. The older brother hid in the middle, while the little guy and the younger brother stood on both sides of him and hit him with snowballs. Whoever hit him would be the one to dodge. Playing sandbags was not as fun as dodging sandbags. In order to be able to dodge sandbags in the middle, the three little guys were completely inspired. So when the older brother accidentally fell, he quickly got up on his own before Qin Shi could help him. The little guy took advantage of the fall to hit him, but the older brother shouted that it didn't count, causing the younger brother to constantly make a face at him, saying that he was shameless. The three little guys were noisy, and their laughter resounded throughout the street. The couple leaned against the railing and leaned against the lakeside of Hohai Lake, quietly watching them play. The warm winter sun, the breeze of Hohai Lake. The greatest happiness in the world, in fact, was nothing more than this asterisk 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 asterisk. Chapter 176. Today's weather was really good, causing the tea house to have a few tables of guests for the first time. Even though the sun was out, the temperature should only be 3 or 4 degrees. The three little guys had been jumping around the whole morning. They were already tired and sweating profusely and gasping for breath. Strenuous exercise in the winter was easy to get sick, so Qin Shi took out 3 pills from Big Cat's snack tray and let each of them take one. Afterwards, Qin Shi also brought out 3 rattan chairs for them. When the three little guys were tired, they sat in a row outside the tea house, basking in the sun while discussing what to do next. The two brothers also had a restless personality. After resting for a while, they proposed to go outside for a stroll. The little guy was now the little follower behind the two brothers' buttocks. Wherever the two brothers wanted to go, the little guy wanted to go. Whatever the two brothers wanted to play, the little guy wanted to play. They really didn't have any opinions. There was no other way. Qin Shi couldn't persuade them, so after discussing with Qin Ruing, he took the three little guys out. There was a big difference between summer and winter in Hohai. In summer, the lakeside willows were swaying, the lush greenery was overflowing, boating on the lake was very leisurely and contented. In winter, the bare branches, white snow, as far as the eye could see, there was only a piece of desolation. Only in the middle of January, when Hohai froze, would this place become lively again. Now there was still some time before Hohai froze, the skating rink was not open, and Qin Shi didn't allow them to go near the lake, so after the three little guys circled around Hohai, they suddenly lost interest and kept clamoring to go back to play marbles. In the process of leading the three little guys back, Qin Shi went to the nearby store to buy 3 yo-yos for them. He simply showed them a few moves which immediately made the two brothers widen their eyes. Yo-yos were imported from overseas, so some of the names of the moves would become very Chinibu after being translated. For example, the names of moves such as Force Whirlwind, Atomic Flame, Lightning Strike, and so on were simply too embarrassing. However, the two brothers seemed to think that it was very cool. After hearing Chin-shi introduce this move as Force Whirlwind, the two of them became even crazier. They kept throwing the yo-yos in their hands, and at the same time, they did not forget to shout, "Watch out! Force Whirlwind! Force Whirlwind! Bayu bayu bayu! Watch my lightning strike! Take this!" The two brothers started fighting with their yo-yos. When the two ropes collided with each other, they immediately formed a dead knot, and it took them a lot of effort to finally untie it. Perhaps it was the difference between boys and girls. The little guy wasn't interested in the strange names of the moves. Instead, he was interested in how Chin-shi retrieved the yo-yo. "Papa, shme." The little guy handed the yo-yo to Chin-shi and looked up at him expectantly. Chin-shi took the yo-yo and picked it up with one hand. Then he walked towards the tea house and gave her a demonstration. "Come on, look, release it, take it back, be gentle. When the rope is tight, you lift it up. How is it? Have you learned it?" The little guy excitedly took the yo-yo from Chin-shi's hands and then did as he was told. He gently threw the yo-yo down, and when the rope tightened, he suddenly pulled it up, and the yo-yo was immediately wrapped in the rope and brought back. "I've learned it! I've learned it!" The little guy excitedly put his arms around Chin-shi's neck and giggled. Chin-shi took the opportunity to kiss the little guy on the cheek, which made the little guy laugh even more. When Chin-shi returned to the tea house with the three little guys, it was already past noon, so he ordered a few dishes in the restaurant next door and prepared to let the children eat. Chin-shi moved the rattan chair back to the tea house and was ready to let the three little guys play inside, but the tea house welcomed another regular customer. Xiao Yuan. After not seeing her for a long time, Xiao Yuan finally dressed normally today. A down jacket and a pair of jeans, simple seemed to be more suitable for her age. She was as pure as the spring moon and as bright as a lotus flower. Xiao Yuan didn't come alone today. There was a middle-aged man about 50 years old standing next to her. The man was thin and tall, wearing a pair of glasses and a suit that didn't fit well. He always inadvertently gave people the feeling of an old pedant. He was obviously an intellectual. Chin-shi was busy moving the rattan chair back to the tea house. After looking back at Xiao Yuan, he smiled and said hello to her. "Long time no see. Boss, let me help you." Xiao Yuan saw Chin-shi's movements, so she quickly ran to his side and helped him move the last rattan chair. Chin-shi didn't refuse. After Xiao Yuan helped him move the last rattan chair into the tea house, he walked out of the tea house with Xiao Yuan again, and then asked with a smile, "This is my father." Xiao Yuan replied a little embarrassedly, then stood to the side. At this time, Father Qiao went directly in front of Chin-shi, and after bowing to him solemnly, he said excitedly, "Thank you, boss. Thank you for saving my life." Chin-shi was a little embarrassed by his enthusiastic attitude, so he quickly smiled and said, "You don't have to be like this. You're too polite. It was just a small matter." No. It was just a small matter to you, but to me, it was a life-saving grace. The ancients say that a drop of water should be repaid with a gushing spring, let alone a life-saving grace. After saying that, Father Qiao bowed to Chin-shi again. Chin-shi was really not used to dealing with old pedants like this. After helping Father Qiao up, he quickly said, "It's cold outside. Come in and sit." Seeing this, Xiao Yuan quickly mediated and said, "Dad, let's go in and talk." The father and daughter of the Qiao family came specially to thank Chin-shi. Huaxia's medical field divided chronic kidney failure into 4 stages: renal compensation stage, renal decompensation stage, renal failure stage, preuremia, and uremia stage. The medical field of the United States divided chronic kidney failure into 5 stages. The so-called uremia stage was the 5th stage of chronic kidney failure, and it was also the final stage. The important indicator of kidney failure was the creatinine value. 133 was the first stage, 186 was the second stage, 451 was the third stage, and more than 707 meant that one had entered the fourth stage, which was the uremia stage. The higher the creatinine, the more toxins in the body, and the greater the damage to the kidney. When the creatinine value exceeded 500, one could begin to consider dialysis. The purpose of dialysis was to reduce the creatinine value. Human organ failure itself was an irreversible phenomenon. If it could be reversed, the person could live a long life. Therefore, there was no other treatment for uremia except for dialysis and kidney transplant. After every dialysis, the creatinine value in the patient's body would decrease. However, it would not be long before the creatinine value continued to rise because the patient's kidney function had been necrotic. If the organ was necrotic, it would take a miracle to recover. However, what everyone did not expect was a miracle really happened. Chen Shi casually gave a pill. After Father Chiao took it, his blood creatinine value began to decrease. Now, it had dropped to 480 from the fourth stage to the third stage. This kind of reversal was almost impossible. This meant that Father Chiao's kidney function had begun to recover and perform the function of detoxification again, causing the creatinine value to continue to decrease. According to this progress, it would not be long before he recovered. Father Chiao's case shocked the entire Huaxia's medical field. After the hospital confirmed that Father Chiao's condition had indeed improved, Father Chiao refused to cooperate with the hospital's investigation and secretly went straight to Beijing with Qiao Yuan. Chapter 177. Father Chiao had only entered the stage of kidney failure before, and his blood creatinine value had not exceeded 707 UMol/L. His illness was discovered early and dialysis control was done in time, so he had not truly entered the final stage, which was often referred to as the late stage of uremia. However, organ failure itself was an irreversible process. Even if it was discovered early, modern medicine could only control the patient's condition as much as possible and delay the deterioration of the condition. Father Chiao was indeed very lucky. Before his kidney function had completely failed, he had taken Qin Shi's elixir in time, so he was able to effectively suppress the condition and let his organ function begin to recover. This time, he had come to visit Qin Shi with a grateful attitude, so he had brought a lot of Guangzhou specialties, such as Guannan bacon, black rice, fragrant rice, and other local specialties. Although they were not worth much, they were worth the thought. As the saying went, goose feathers were sent from 1,000 miles away. The gift was light, but the thought was heavy. Perhaps it was because Father Chiao had been diligent in teaching for a lifetime that he had saved enough good fortune for himself. Therefore, he had never thought that this kind of grateful attitude would actually save his life by accident. A simplified version of the energy elixir would not be able to fully restore his kidney. After the effect of the elixir wore off, his condition would naturally begin to deteriorate again. As the saying went, when you saved someone, you should help them to the end. Chen Shi was not a stingy person. After hearing Father Chiao's intentions, he took out 2 more energy elixirs from the bar counter. It was still the same explanation. The pills left by the old Chinese medicine doctor were very helpful for kidney disease, but this time, when Qiao Yuan took the pills from Qin Shi's hand, she was so excited that her whole body trembled slightly. After Qin Shi told them that they could take it all at once, Qiao Yuan hurriedly helped her father swallow the 2 pills one by one. After taking the pills, the father and daughter were so excited that they could not control themselves. A teacher in a small county had not seen much of the world in his life. He did not even know how to say a few words of courtesy. He only knew how to repeatedly thank Qin Shi. Looking at his excited expression, it was as if he was about to dig out his heart and show it to Qin Shi. Qiao Yuan wasn't any better. When she heard that Qin Shi had convinced her father to take these 2 pills, she was so excited that tears almost flowed out. It was actually quite painful to deal with people who didn't know how to socialize. One of the most likely situations to occur was awkwardness. Everyone felt awkward because they couldn't get along. Therefore, Qin Shi thought for a while and changed the topic to Qiao Yuan. At the mention of his daughter, Father Chiao finally opened his mouth. In that little corner of our little place, old Xiao, can be considered to have some fame. When Xiao Xiao came home and told me all those things, I almost fainted from anger. If it wasn't for her mother stopping me, I would have beaten her to death. I came to Shangjing this time to thank you in person. Thank you for saving my life. Secondly, I want Jojo to return all the money I swindled. Although we are poor, we don't earn this kind of black-hearted money. After all, Xiao Yuan was only a university student in her early 20s and hadn't experienced society. To put it bluntly, she was still insensible and hadn't grown up. She only wanted to earn money to treat her father's illness, but she didn't think about how to earn money. She did whatever came quickly. If everyone was like her, then society would be a mess. The Qiao family didn't have much money, but Xiao Yuan grew up in a scholarly family and received a good education. However, because of a small setback in front of her, she went astray and did the shady business of swindling people. This kind of behavior was simply unforgivable in Father Qiao's eyes. Although in a big city like Shangjing, Qiao Yuan's family could only be considered as ordinary people living at the bottom of society. However, it was this kind of country teacher who had never seen the world and couldn't even speak standard Mandarin that always had the awareness of being a role model. Therefore, he couldn't accept his daughter's behavior at all. Father Qiao punished Qiao Yuan by kneeling for an entire night and then asked Qiao Yuan to return all the money to others. Together with the keyboard player and the boss's share, she had to return the amount that they were swindled of. The last deal was with Wang Hao's brother. The money had already been returned, but before that, Qiao Yuan had already earned 12,000 yuan. In other words, she had to pay back an additional 18,000 yuan when she returned it. Back then, she only earned 12,000 yuan, but now she had to return 30,000 yuan. Of course, Qiao Yuan didn't have that much money, so the remaining 18,000 yuan was naturally paid by Father Qiao. When it came to matters of principle, Father Qiao was very old-fashioned and wouldn't change what he had decided on. Qiao Yuan couldn't persuade him, so she could only call people in front of Father Qiao. After returning the money, Qiao Yuan also received countless curses and scoldings. She felt so wrong that she cried a few times. However, from Father Qiao's point of view, she only had herself to blame and didn't deserve sympathy. After hearing how Father Qiao educated his daughter, she couldn't help but look back at the three little guys in the corner. As a father, Father Qiao was clearly qualified. When the children went down the wrong path, as a parent, he naturally had to pull them back. A teacher in a small county who had taught for a lifetime might seem mediocre to others, but at least when it came to educating children, Father Qiao was absolutely successful. The two didn't chat for long before the restaurant next door delivered the food that Chen Shi had just ordered. Chen Shi warmly invited the father and daughter of the Qiao family to stay for a meal, but Father Qiao was unwilling. After repeatedly thanking Chen Shi for saving his life, he hurriedly left with his daughter. He came by train and didn't know how long it would take to arrive, so he didn't buy a return ticket. He should still be able to make it if he rushed to buy a ticket now. From Guangzhou to Shangjing, it would only take 5 or 6 hours. This way, he could still save on today's accommodation fee. The father and daughter of the Qiao family came in a hurry and left in a hurry. However, Father Qiao's appearance brought a lot of inspiration to Chen Shi. From this, it could be seen that educating children was a long and arduous task. As a parent, it wasn't enough to just raise a child. The tea house continued to operate. The winter sun was very short. Before 4 o'clock, it was gloomy outside again. The three little guys were tired from playing today, so they seemed a little listless all afternoon. Drowsiness was contagious. After the little guy fell asleep on the climbing mat, the two brothers also lay down next to her and fell asleep. It wasn't until they were about to close that Qin Ruiying woke them up. The two brothers first rubbed their eyes. When they heard Qin Ruiying say that she was going to take them home, they nodded in a daze. Grandpa said that they had to listen to their uncle and aunt today. But it wasn't until Chen Shi picked up the little guy and Qin Ruiying led them out of the tea house that the two brothers finally came back to their senses. Chapter 178. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the family of three brought their two followers back to the Sihiyuan. Most of the local residents in Hohai lived in the Sihyuan. Therefore, the two brothers didn't feel that there was anything special about their two-section Sihyuan. This place only had an extra front yard and a few more rooms compared to a normal Sihyuan. But because this was their sister's home, the two brothers were curious about every room. Once they entered the courtyard, the little boy led them everywhere. The back room, the west room, the east room, the main hall, and the back room. They ran through every single room. They even alerted Qin Yongyan in the study. When the little boy saw his grandfather, who had not shown up for a long time, he immediately stood under the eaves and sweetly shouted, "Grandfather!" When the two brothers heard this, they very obediently followed the little boy and shouted, "Hello, grandfather!" Qin Yongyan lowered his head and looked at the three little ones in front of him. Then he couldn't help but laugh. Using his hand to pat their heads, Qin Yongyan smiled and said, "Good boys, you guys go play." But the little boy nodded and led the two brothers into the main hall. She was still a little unfamiliar with her grandfather. If it was Aunt Zhang, the little boy would have already run over to her and asked for a hug. Looking at the three little guys running away in front of him, the smile on Qin Yongyan's face didn't disappear for a moment. He looked to be in his 40s, but in reality, Qin Yongyan's real age was even older than Aunt Zhang. At 30, no doubts at 40, knowing destiny at 50, ear docile at 60, and senile at 70. The so-called ear docile didn't mean that one's ears were sharp, but it meant that one could listen to unpleasant words. It didn't matter if one was cursed or scolded. Nothing could go against one's heart. At this age, one had basically seen through life and seen through fame and fortune. Perhaps it was because of his state of mind, Qin Yongyan's recent cultivation progress could be said to be very fast. He was almost at the late stage of qi refinement. As his cultivation progressed, Qin Yongyan became more aware of Qin Shi's power. His son-in-law was so powerful that his father-in-law couldn't even raise his head in front of him. But it was also because of this that his daughter was living a happy life now. Qin Ruoying didn't even dare to imagine such a life. Even he felt like he was living in a dream. Thinking of this, Qin Yongyan could not help but shake his head and return to the study. After the three little fellows walked around the entire courtyard, they finally returned to the front of the main hall. Because they wanted to have a good game of hide and seek. Rock, scissors, paper. Rock, scissors, paper. After 3 draws, the little fellow and her brother used scissors, while her brother used paper. After realizing that he had lost, the elder brother stomped his feet in anger. However, he was willing to accept his loss. Although he was a little unwilling, he still obediently leaned on the table and counted loudly. The little fellow and her brother turned around and ran out of the main hall. The younger brother was still a little unfamiliar with the road, so he followed the little fellow with his head down and ran towards the west wing. Seeing this, the little fellow could not help but become anxious. She did not dare to speak, so she could only push her brother to the opposite east wing. After her brother turned around and ran to the east wing in a panic, the little fellow slipped into the wardrobe in the west wing. This was her favorite place to hide, because there were a lot of clothes in the wardrobe, so it was very warm to squeeze in there. The elder brother's countdown soon ended. When he walked out of the main hall, the entire courtyard quieted down. Chen Shi was busy cooking for them in the kitchen, while Qin Ruing stood on the steps outside the west wing and looked at him with a smile. The elder brother was very clever. After looking around, he trotted to Qin Ruing, raised his head and whispered, "Auntie, do they know where they are hiding?" Hearing this, Qin Ruing shook her head with a smile and did not tell him. The elder brother had no choice but to look for them honestly. He first went into the west wing and looked around, but did not find anything strange. It was probably because this was not his home, so the elder brother did not think of looking through the wardrobe. After looking around and not seeing anyone, the elder brother ran directly to the east wing opposite. At this time, the little fellow, who had been paying attention to the situation outside, quietly pushed open the wardrobe a little. After confirming that the elder brother had left, the little fellow came out of the wardrobe and then leaned against the window to secretly observe the elder brother's every move. Not long after the elder brother ran into the east wing, there was a burst of cheers from inside. Then, the elder brother walked out with the younger brother, who was frowning. Perhaps wanting to end this game quickly, after the elder brother looked around the main hall, the younger brother pointed to the west wing quietly. Seeing this, the elder brother immediately rushed into the west wing with a laugh. The little fellow was leaning against the window, laughing secretly. When she saw the elder brother rushing to the west wing, she was suddenly shocked. She wanted to crawl back into the wardrobe, but it was too late, so she was caught red-handed by the elder brother who rushed over. "Found you! I found you!" The elder brother's proud laughter sounded in the courtyard. Hide-and-seek was indeed a very fun game. As long as the venue was suitable, it could be played for a long time. The three little guys played several games in a row until Chin-shi finished cooking dinner. They reluctantly returned to the west wing under the husband and wife's greeting. After dinner, the sky was already dark. Chin-roing did not allow them to go out and run around, so the three little guys sat on the bed and watched cartoons. The elder brother wanted to watch Pigman, the younger brother wanted to watch Boonie Bears, and the little fellow wanted to watch SpongeBob SquarePants. The three little guys had different opinions and immediately quarreled over the control of the remote control. Seeing this, Chin-shi had to suppress them. He took the remote control and let them order Frozen. The little fellow had already seen it once, but she still enjoyed watching it the second time. It was the brothers' first time watching it, so they were immediately fascinated by the beautiful magic world inside. There was a kissing scene in Frozen. When the elder brothers saw Anna and Christopher hugging and kissing, the elder brother followed suit and turned his head to kiss the little fellow. But just as his mouth was about to kiss the little fellow, the elder brother regrettably found that there seemed to be an air wall between him and Yin. No matter how hard he tried, there was no way he could get closer. The elder brother's movements were very fast. After being stopped by Chin-shi, Chin-roing noticed that something was wrong. When she saw the elder brother's embarrassed look as he tried to kiss the little fellow, she could not help but secretly laugh. At this time, the little fellow also noticed that something was wrong with her brother. Just as she turned her head, she was shocked by her brother's pig-like appearance, so she patted his forehead with her hand and muttered, "What are you doing?" The elder brother awkwardly retracted his head and then hid under the blanket, not daring to show his head. The husband and wife looked at each other and could not help but shake their heads and laugh. 4- or 5-year-old children did not have so many dirty thoughts. Their behavior was learned from the things around them, so Chin-shi did not blame him. However, it was because of the elder brother's sudden action that they completely lost the opportunity to sleep with the little fellow. After watching the cartoon, the two brothers were carried by Chin-shi, one in each hand, and directly led them to the east wing. Tonight, the little fellow slept with Chin-ring, and the two brothers slept with him. The two brothers cried and made a fuss, shouting that they wanted to sleep with their sister. But Chin-shi did not pay attention to them at all, as if he did not hear them. They wanted to take advantage of his daughter. Chapter 179. The two brothers hesitated for a long time. Although they were usually very outgoing, they seemed to be homesick at night. The one they were most familiar with in the courtyard was the little guy, so the two brothers always wanted to sleep with the little guy. But no matter how much they cried, Chin-shi was unmoved. He was quite traditional in this aspect. Because Nyen was a girl, Chin-shi always felt that his daughter would be at a disadvantage if she stayed with a boy. Plus, his brother almost took advantage of the little guy just now, which made Chin-shi even more certain that girls were at a disadvantage. He was already very polite that he didn't chase the two brothers out of the courtyard. Although the two brothers were still young, 3 to 6 years old was the sensitive period for a child to construct a psychological gender. As a parent, it was natural to teach the child that there was a difference between men and women. Parents gave the child the correct guidance, and as the child grew up, they would gradually form a comprehensive understanding of men and women's clothing, behavior, and personality traits, and gradually form their own psychological gender. As for those parents who raised the boy as a girl and the girl as a boy, in fact, he really should go see Farewell My Concubine, because Cheng Jie was an excellent example. This was called transsexualism in the medical field, which was also called gender identity disorder. There were both congenital and acquired factors. If it was congenital, then it was fine, but if it was acquired by the parents, then it could be called a tragedy. She had already made up his mind. One day, he would have to properly educate the three little guys and let them understand the difference between men and women. The east room was Qin Shueqing's room. Although she hadn't been home for many days, there was still a faint fragrance in the room. The bed was very comfortable to sleep on, but the two brothers tossed and turned for a long time. Chen Shi was not Gu Lao after all, nor was he the brother's father. So after a while, seeing that Chen Shi still refused to agree, they could only obediently lie on the bed with pouted lips. The two brothers were also tired today, so it didn't take long for them to fall into a deep sleep. After they fell asleep, Chen Shi cast 2 meditation incantations on the two brothers, and then quietly walked out of the east room. It was the wee hours of the morning, and there was no moon tonight. It was so dark in the courtyard that one couldn't even see their own fingers. The temperature in the middle of the night was very low. The bone-piercing cold wind kept blowing, bringing with it some light snow that drifted into the courtyard. There was a slight fluctuation of spiritual aura in the west wing and the main room. That was because Qin Ring and Qin Yongyan were both cultivating diligently. Qin Ruing had to take care of the child during the day, so she could squeeze out some time to cultivate at night. In addition, her cultivation was not high, and she had to sleep for at least 4 hours every day, so the progress of her cultivation was very slow. Compared to Qin Ring, Chen Shi's cultivation progress could be said to be advancing by leaps and bounds. He would leave every night and head to Spirit Mountain to cultivate. The terrain there was remote, and it could be considered the place with the densest spirit qi within a radius of 1,000 miles. In this place, Chen Shi could fully refine the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Based on his current accumulation of quintessential essence, it was actually comparable to the early stage of yuaning. Although there was still a long way to go before he reached the soul formation stage, at least Chen Shi would not need to burn his essence blood when facing an expert at the level of a divine general. Quintessential essence was the foundation of all cultivators. No one would joke around with their lives, including Chen Shi. If Chen Shi's previous situation was described in a game, then he was a mid-tier sorcerer who had no mana and could only rely on normal attacks. After this period of recovery, Chen Shi could finally use some small skills. However, because he had not added any skill points, even if he had enough mana, Chen Shi could not use any big skills. Quintessential essence could be slowly recovered, but the damage to the soul could not be healed by cultivation alone. There was a spiritual medicine in Heavenly Spiral that specialized in healing soul injuries, and that medicine was one of the main methods to heal soul injuries. Unfortunately, this type of medicine was an extremely rare heavenly treasure to begin with. With the current situation of heaven and earth's spiritual energy, it was almost impossible to produce such a high-grade spiritual medicine, so Chen Shi really could not think of any way to heal his soul injuries. When the soul was damaged, the divine sense was the most affected. His divine sense was like a radar, allowing Chen Shi to sense everything within 1,000 miles without using his 5 senses. Not even the slightest movement in the wind could escape his eyes. Without the divine sense, Chen Shi had to rely on his eyes to determine his direction while flying in the sky, which was really uncomfortable. Spirit Mountain's location was unique, and the giant rock at the top of the mountain had become Chen Shi's exclusive throne. As usual, after carefully inspecting the surroundings, Chen Shi sat cross-legged on the rock and began to cultivate. However, not long after he closed his eyes, he suddenly opened them again. It was a little strange. According to common sense, he had been cultivating here for a period of time, so the spiritual energy here should be a little thinner. After all, he was a cultivator in the soul formation stage, not a beginner like Qin Rung. Every time Chen Shi cultivated with all his strength, he would naturally have an aura that could swallow mountains and rivers. A night's effort was enough to catch up with several months of Qin Ruing's effort. Although Spirit Mountain was large, there were only a few places with dense spiritual energy. But why did the spiritual energy nearby not seem to have changed much after he cultivated here for a period of time? Could it be that he was cultivating a false immortal? But this was obviously impossible. After all, the true essence that Chen Shi refined was real. He was still worried that if he cultivated with all his strength, he might devour all the spiritual energy nearby, causing Spirit Mountain to become a dead mountain without any vitality. But who would have thought that such a strange situation would occur now? Chen Shi stood up from the boulder. In order to confirm the cause, he flew around Spirit Mountain. However, after flying around, he didn't find anything strange. Everything was very natural. It was completely a natural paradise. Could it be this endless stream of spiritual energy was flowing from somewhere else? It sounded a little ridiculous, but after thinking about it carefully, it seemed to make some sense. After all, spiritual energy was like air, flowing at any time. Maybe the spiritual energy here flowed from Taihang Mountain? Unable to find the reason, and not finding any abnormalities, Chen Shi simply threw this question to the back of his mind. Since the spiritual energy here was so rich, he wouldn't be polite. After setting up a spirit gathering array on the mountain peak, Chen Shi began to cultivate with all his strength. This time, he didn't restrain himself. He opened his stomach and swallowed like a towel. In an instant, the wind and clouds surged. Because of the violent surge of spiritual energy, a cloud vortex even appeared in the sky above Spirit Mountain. Chen Shi wanted to see if the spiritual energy here would decrease if he cultivated with all his strength. Time flew by. When the sun came out from the clouds in the east, Chen Shi slowly opened his eyes. Under his hard work, the spiritual energy here had decreased by a large amount as he wished. Chapter 180. Perhaps because of the home field advantage, the two brothers completely became the little guy's followers. When they woke up, Chen Shi had just finished helping them wash up, and the two brothers rushed into the west wing. The little guy was already sitting on the chair and eating breakfast. When he saw them rushing in, he held up a steamed bun and smiled at them. Time for breakfast. Children don't know what is polite, so they rushed over as soon as they entered the door. The older brother saw that there was only one chair in front of him, so he pushed his younger brother away and quickly sat on the chair himself. The younger brother was not happy, so he pushed him a few times and squeezed in to sit with him. "You go over there." "I don't want to. I want to sit here." "Get out of the way. You're squeezing me." "But this is not your chair." Qin Ruing looked at the two brothers and then got up to give the seat to the younger brother, which stopped their first quarrel of the day. This was the bad thing about twins, they always wanted to win or lose. Qin Ruing was serving the three little guys, but Chen Shi suddenly received a call from Gu Lao. The old man was delayed by something, so he would not be back until the afternoon. Although he believed that Chen Shi would not treat the two brothers badly, out of concern for his grandson, Gu Lao talked with Chen Shi for a while, and then euphemistically expressed that he wanted to talk to the two brothers. Hearing this, Chen Shi turned on the speaker and put the phone in front of the two brothers. The two brothers, one after another, related in a little while what they had done on the previous day. After listening, Gu Lao finally felt relieved and hung up the phone. Chen Shi told the two brothers that their grandfather would come back in the afternoon to pick them up. However, what he did not expect was that the two brothers were not sad at all after hearing the news, but jumped with joy. "Uncle, can you take us out to play?" "Huh? Where do you want to go?" "The amusement park." Hearing this, Chen Shi and Qin Ruing couldn't help but look at each other. It was probably because they heard Nian Nian bragging about her experience at the children's playground that the two brothers engraved that place in their minds. Just like Nian Nian in the past, she was very envious of others, but Auntie Zhang couldn't bring her along. Thinking about it, it was quite pitiful. Thus, Chen Shi patted the brothers' heads and said with a smile, "Okay, Uncle will take you there. We'll leave after breakfast, okay?" "Alright." The two brothers were so excited that their faces turned red, while the little fellow was smiling proudly at the side, as if silently saying that they were basking in her light. What was the reaction of the child when he was excited? He stomped his feet. After hastily eating breakfast, her brother ran to the steps outside the west wing. He kept jumping and shouting, "Hurry up, hurry up." It's almost afternoon. When the younger brother saw this, he also ran out and kept stomping his feet on the steps. No one knew what they were doing. The little fellow was really proud today, and the smile on his little face never stopped. After a simple packing, Chen Shi carried the little fellow, and Qin Ruing held the two brothers, 2 adults and 3 children, and the group of 5 slowly walked out of the courtyard. It was still troublesome for the 5 of them to take a taxi. The 3 little fellows didn't want to be separated, and Chen Shi didn't want to be separated from Qin Ruing, so it wasn't until the 3rd car that the driver finally agreed to give them a ride. He also asked one of the little fellows to hide and not be seen by the traffic police. The Children's Experience Museum last time was for civilian consumption, so this time Chen Shi was going to take them to a high-end one. In Kids with Farnds, a children's amusement park that didn't even have a Chinese name, was known as the cutest fairy tale world in Shangjing, and was also a holy place for internet celebrities to take photos. This place couldn't be entered without children, so many internet celebrities had to make a special trip to borrow a child. The tickets were very expensive because it was the weekend, and the package cost 568 yuan. It was limited to 1 adult and 1 child, and they could only play for 2 hours. This place was not as big as the Children's Experience Museum last time, but the decoration was extremely exquisite. After putting on anti-skid socks and walking in, they were greeted by a giant teddy bear about 3 meters tall. The 3 little fellows had never seen such a big teddy bear in their lives, so they were shocked on the spot. The teddy bear sat on the ground, and both of its legs were about 1 meter tall. The little fellow stood next to it and wanted to climb onto the big bear's legs, but she couldn't climb up. Seeing this, the older brother immediately came to her side. Then, like a little eunuch welcoming a princess on a horse, he bent his back and knelt on the ground, then said loudly, "Sister, you're stepping on my back. I'll carry you up." Hearing this, the little fellow didn't hesitate at all. She stepped on his back and climbed up. Seeing that she was struggling to climb, the younger brother stood below and pushed the little fellows but hard. Chen Shi stood aside and watched, speechless. Qin Ruing saw his expression and knew that he felt that his daughter was at a disadvantage again, so she couldn't help but complain, "They're still children. Why do you have so many dirty thoughts?" Okay, I'm dirty. After being scolded by his wife, Chen Shi had to raise his hands and surrender with a wry smile. The couple didn't interfere with their actions. After the little fellow climbed up, the younger brother also wanted to step on the older brother's back and climb up. But at this time, the older brother quickly stood up from the ground and said to the younger brother, "You carry me up, and I'll pull you up after I'm up." The younger brother didn't doubt him, so he stood below and supported the older brothers but with all his strength, sending him up. The little fellow sat on the big bear's leg and pulled the older brother's arm up with all her strength. With their joint efforts, the older brother successfully climbed up. However, after the older brother went up, he didn't pull the younger brother. After making a face at the younger brother, he laughed proudly and said, "Come up by yourself." With that, the older brother jumped onto the other leg of the big bear. The younger brother stood below and looked at the little fellow and the older brother on the big bear's leg with a confused expression. He tried to climb up by himself, but the big bear's leg was higher than him, so it was impossible for him to climb up. "I'll pull you up." The little fellow couldn't stand the older brother's behavior, so she immediately lay on the big bear's leg and reached out to the younger brother. However, her strength was limited, so she couldn't pull the younger brother up by herself. The younger brother slipped down again. Looking at the older brother's proud look, the more the younger brother thought about it, the more wronged he felt. He couldn't help but cry out of anger. Seeing this, Chen Shi wanted to go forward and help his younger brother, but he was stopped by Qin Ru. "Wait, let's see." Sure enough, seeing the younger brother cry, the smile on the older brother's face froze. He thought for a moment and immediately jumped back, then lay on the big bear's leg and said to the younger brother, "Don't cry. I'll pull you up." With that, the older brother stretched out his hands to the younger brother. The little fellow also stretched out her hands again. The younger brother wiped his tears, glanced at the older brother, and then stretched out his hands very aggrievedly. Finally, with the joint efforts of the little fellow and the older brother, the younger brother successfully climbed onto the big bear's leg. Although the older brother finally pulled him up, the younger brother seemed to be still angry with the older brother, so after coming up, he directly jumped onto the other leg of the big bear to sulk. At this time, Qin Ruing took out her mobile phone with a smile, then came to the big bear and took a group photo of the three little guys. In the photo, Chapter 181. Inkides with the ticket price for friends was so high, but seriously, it was not worth the price. Especially for people like Chin Shi who could only take a few photos all year round, this place was not as entertaining as the Children's Experience Center that he took the little guy to last time. There were only a few main amusement facilities here: Brown Bear's rock climbing wall, Coney Rabbit's spider tower, Edward's slide, Leo the Frog's trampoline, Steamed Bun Man's Skynet, as well as a pink ocean pool and some scattered small toys. The biggest selling point was not the children's entertainment facilities at all, but the decoration design style. The background was white, giving people a clean and bright feeling, and there were giant dolls everywhere. Once people walked in, they would feel like they were in a fantasy world. Therefore, it became a selfie mecca for online celebrities to show off their love. The designer probably targeted the parents, not the children themselves. That was why it was so popular. Of course, this did not mean that this place was useless. After all, these entertainment facilities were still very attractive to children. The children's paradise was divided into two levels. The upper level was a hollow climbing net with a rotating slide in the middle. Perhaps because there were so many people, the voices of the three little guys were particularly loud, attracting a lot of attention as soon as they came in. The weekend ticket was 200 yuan more expensive than the weekday ticket, so there were fewer people. The three little guys walked into the children's paradise. As soon as they saw the climbing net leading to the second floor, the older brother immediately shouted, "I want the slide." His words were like a spark thrown into a barrel of explosives, instantly igniting the little guy and the younger brother. The three little fellows rushed towards the climbing net almost as if they were trying to outdo each other. They had to compete to see who could climb faster, and who fell behind was a puppy. The parents could only wait below, so the couple sat by the ocean pool and quietly watched the three little guys play. There were many people who came here to take photos, and there was even an internet celebrity lying in the ocean pool and doing a live broadcast. Perhaps affected by the surrounding atmosphere, Chen Shi asked Qin Ruoying to take out her mobile phone. The two of them also planned to join in the fun and take a selfie. Just as the two of them leaned together to take selfies with their mobile phones, a little girl holding a DSLR carefully approached them. "Hello, I'm a student from Peking University's photography department. Can I take a picture for you?" The little girl's name was Sun Yuan Yuan. Her name was round, but she was actually a skinny little girl who was less than 1.6 meters tall. In terms of age, she was about the same age as Qiao Yuan, so she seemed a little shy. After saying this to Qin Ring, Sun Yuanyuan held the SR camera and stood in front of the couple with a nervous expression. Qin Ruoying glanced at her and did not answer immediately. Instead, she turned to look at Chen Shi. After the couple communicated silently, Chen Shi nodded with a smile and said, "Then I'll have to trouble you." "Thank you." Hearing Chen Shi's reply, Sun Yuanyuan couldn't help but nod excitedly, then took a few steps back with the camera. Chen Shi didn't know much about photography. He thought that professionals like them would have a lot to pay attention to, so he asked politely, "What do you want us to do? Do you want us to pose in any way?" "It's natural to shoot portraits. You can be more casual, just like when you took the selfie just now." Sun Yuanyuan knelt on the ground with one knee, holding the lens with one hand and the camera with the other. She was clearly in the zone, so her speech was much clearer and more fluent than before. "That's all. That's all. You can be more casual and do whatever you want." The couple sat side by the ocean pool. Qin Ruoying thought for a while, then gently leaned her head on Chen Shi's shoulder, and Chen Shi naturally held her hand. They didn't look at the camera, but stared at each other, and in less than a second, they were in the zone. It was a common look between lovers. Seeing this, Sun Yuanyuan was excited on the spot. Click, click, click. After pressing the shutters several times, she stood up again with the camera. Sun Yuanyuan looked at the photos, and her face was full of excitement. Judging from her expression, she seemed to be very satisfied with these photos. "Take a look? Are you satisfied?" The photo rights belonged to the couple, so she immediately took the camera and handed it to them. It's okay, I like it. Qin Ruing smiled and nodded. Hearing this, Sun Yuanyuan couldn't help but clench her fists in excitement. She said excitedly, "Can I add you on WeChat? I'll send the photos to you after I export them." Qin Ruing didn't have WeChat, so Chen Shi said with a smile, "Add me." But after exchanging WeChat with Chen Shi, Sun Yuanyuan didn't leave, but kept looking at the photos with the camera. The more she looked at the photos, the more she liked them. Sun Yuanyuan held the camera for a long time. After seeing that the couple didn't leave, she carefully leaned over and asked with a complicated expression, "I think this photo is very good. There's a photography competition next year. Can I take it to participate?" Participate? Hearing this, Chen Shi suddenly frowned. When Sun Yuanyuan saw his expression, she immediately waved her hand and said anxiously, "It's okay if you can't, I'll take it back and keep it. I promise I won't show it to anyone. I promise." Some people didn't like their photos to be circulated outside, so the little girl was afraid of causing Chen Shi's disgust. If Chen Shi asked her to delete the photos, it would be a tragedy. Qin Ruing saw the little girl's timid look, so she smiled and said, "I'm fine with it." Then she turned her head and looked at Chen Shi. When Chen Shi made eye contact with her, he suddenly shook his head and laughed. Since his wife said so, what else could he not do? It wasn't that he was ashamed, he just didn't want his photos to be circulated around. Since he was going to participate in a photography competition, a lot of people would definitely see the photos of him and his wife. When Chen Shi thought about how people would judge the photos of him and his wife, he always felt a little strange. However, since Qin Ruing agreed, he obviously wouldn't refuse, so he nodded and smiled, "No problem." "Thank you. Thank you." The little girl thanked the couple profusely. After saying goodbye to them, she ran away like a thief who had stolen some treasure. The so-called portrait photography was to take the most inadvertently moving picture of you. Just like Shaoquan, a simple black and white photo was enough to amaze time. People who looked at the photo 20 years later couldn't help but palpitate. Sun Yuanyuan knew that she had taken a good photo. Chapter 182. The three little guys had a lot of fun today. Although it was only 2 hours, because it was full of large-scale entertainment facilities, it was very tiring to play. So before the time limit was up, they were already tired and lying in the ocean pool to rest. When they left, they were still a little reluctant. After Qin Shi bought each of them a brown bear school bag, the three little guys were so happy that they started to smile like flowers blooming. After the new year, the winter vacation was almost over and Nian Nian should be sent to kindergarten. He just didn't know if she would be willing to go by then. The two brothers also made a profit today, not to mention that they came to such a high-end children's amusement park for nothing. Chen Shi also took them to the mall and bought new clothes for the little guys, and several sets for them. Free food, free accommodation, free play, and before leaving, he let them carry big and small bags back home. In the eyes of children, such an elder was simply an angel. By the time the couple left the mall with the children, it was already 3:30 in the afternoon. Because they carried too many things, this time, no driver was willing to take the risk of being caught by the traffic police to give them a ride. There was no other way. Qin Ruing took the three little guys to leave by taxi, and Qin Shi then took another taxi alone. Having said that, they really should buy a car, otherwise, it would be really inconvenient to move around in the city. And after buying a car, the couple could take the little guy to the suburbs at any time in the future. That simple life, thinking about it, felt good. Not long after the couple returned to the tea house, Gu Lao hurried over. It would be a lie to say that he was not worried after not seeing his two grandchildren for a day. Now there is a saying called skipping a generation, which is the so-called enjoying the grandsons. Elders were closer to their grandchildren than to their children. Gu Lao was a widowed retired old man, and usually only the two brothers could relieve his inner loneliness and loneliness. As soon as the two brothers saw that their grandfather came back, they proudly took out the clothes and toys that Qin Shi bought for them. Seeing this, Gu Lao immediately frowned. Probably because Qin Shi was still on the side, Gu Lao did not scold the two brothers, but quickly took out a stack of money from his pocket. Looking at the red and green colors, It was at least a few hundred yuan. I didn't bring much money today. Take these first. I'll bring you more tomorrow. But how could Chen Shi accept his money? The plate of snacks in front of Big Cat was worth at least a few billion, not to mention a lot. Gu Lao couldn't dissuade Chen Shi. In the end, he had no choice but to slap the two brothers' heads and ask them to properly thank Chen Shi. The two brothers rubbed their heads in confusion. They didn't know why their grandfather was angry. After chatting with Chen Shi for a while, Gu Lao left with the two brothers. After they left, the family of three prepared to close up shop and go home. Anyway, the business of the tea house was up to them. Although it was a little early today, it didn't matter. The little girl was still looking forward to going home to show off her new clothes. Night fell. When the little girl fell asleep and Qin Ruing began to cultivate, Chen Shi quietly left the courtyard. It was fine that he didn't notice it before, but now that he found out the abnormality, he naturally wanted to find out what was going on. After a while, Chen Shi came to Spirit Mountain again. After landing on the top of the mountain, he closed his eyes and carefully felt it. Not long after, when Chen Shi opened his eyes again, he couldn't help but frown slightly. Last night, he set up a spirit gathering formation and used all his strength, which caused Spirit Mountain to lose at least 10% of the spirit energy of heaven and earth overnight. The spirit energy of heaven and earth was known as the origin of all things. As long as this planet did not become a dead one, then the spirit energy of heaven and earth could be called a renewable energy source like solar energy and water energy. It could be regenerated, but it also needed a process. The spirit energy of heaven and earth here was really plundered by Chen Shi. However, it had only been more than 10 hours, and the spirit energy here had already recovered a little. Although it was not much, if Chen Shi hadn't carefully felt it, he wouldn't have even noticed the changes. But at this rate, it was estimated that in a few months, the spirit energy here would be able to recover to its original level. This recovery speed was almost catching up with the heavenly jade domain. What was going on? Because of the damage to his divine sense, he couldn't carefully explore every detail in this mountain range. Since he couldn't use his divine sense, he used the stupidest way to find it bit by bit. This time, Chen Shi didn't fly carelessly, but flew extremely slowly. Like plowing the ground, he plowed Spirit Mountain from beginning to end. However, he spent 2 hours carefully studying Spirit Mountain, but he still didn't find anything out of the ordinary. Everything was so natural. But the more it was like this, the stranger it seemed. Chen Shi had been back on Earth for a while. How could he not know the situation on Earth? Earth was not a dead star and could still produce spirit energy of heaven and earth. But the speed was like a locked faucet, only opened a little, so it took half a day to fill a basin of wash water. But now, it was like a faucet burst. As soon as the faucet was opened, the water gushed out crazily. This speed was almost catching up with the heavenly jade domain. What kind of place was the heavenly jade domain? It was a cultivation holy land that could give birth to an immortal emperor. Just like a dam that had just been opened, the water level downstream would not rise in a short time. But if this continued, then the spirit energy of heaven and earth would continue to increase. If this continued, Earth would inevitably become the second heavenly jade domain. Earth's spirit energy recovered? As soon as this thought appeared in Chen Shi's mind, his heart couldn't help but jump, and his whole body couldn't help but tremble. This matter involved too much, and even Chen Shi was a little shocked. In order to verify his guess, Chen Shi pondered for a while, then rushed to the sky and went straight to the Qinling Mountains. Because he was familiar with that place. After the spirit binding array was activated, it set off a tide of spirit energy. Now that the array had been destroyed, the accumulation of the village for hundreds of years was also destroyed. Logically speaking, the spirit energy of that place would inevitably drop by a level. So he only needed to go there and take a look to know what was going on. The moonlight in the Qinling Mountains was very bright. The moonlight was like a silver radiance, shining on the piles of snow and reflecting the cold light, illuminating everything around. The village had been reduced to ruins, and the villagers had all left. In the center of the ruins, there was a huge semicircular crater left behind after the battle between Chen Shi and the Immortal General. Immortal cultivators were not nuclear bombs, and after collision, there would be no radiation. Instead, a lot of true essence would escape. True essence was the product of refining the spirit energy of heaven and earth, so the deepest part of the crater was the place with the densest spirit energy. In the huge crater, a tulip was leisurely blooming in it. Tulips were very resistant to cold and could withstand a low temperature of -35 degrees Celsius in winter. When the temperature returned to above 8 degrees Celsius, it could begin to grow. But under the stimulation of the surging spirit energy, this tulip actually bloomed in this cold winter. The spirit energy of heaven and earth here had actually recovered to the level before the array was destroyed. Qin frowned as he floated above the ruins, staring at the deep crater in front of him in a daze. Suddenly, a thought jumped out of his mind. Immortal General of Tianmen? Tide of Spirit Energy. Chapter 183. There were some things that one wouldn't know if one didn't want to know. Because the spirit energy on Earth was too sparse, Qin had never paid attention to the ancient legacies on Earth. It was like letting a wolf into a flock of sheep. He ate and slept every day. Why should he think so much? To put it bluntly, he didn't feel threatened. After all, this wasn't the heavenly jade world. Spirit energy was like oxygen. It flowed. Therefore, even if some places had high levels of oxygen and some had low levels of oxygen, there would never be a situation where there wasn't any oxygen at all. If the heavenly jade world was compared to a bathtub, then Earth was a bucket. If he scooped up a bowl of water from the bucket, it would reduce the water in the bucket by a large amount. But what if the bucket turned into a lake with running water and a stable supply of water? As a deity transformation cultivator, it was simply impossible for him to drain a cultivation planet that was as beautiful as heavenly jade. At the current rate of development, it was only a matter of time before Earth turned into a cultivation planet. In Qin's knowledge, this was already beyond the scope of a cultivator's ability. Even an immortal emperor couldn't turn a declining cultivation planet with sparse spirit energy into a cultivation holy land with abundant spirit energy. What was going on? Qin silently looked at the ruins in front of him. Although there were thousands of doubts in his heart, no one could answer him. After all, who in this world could compare to him in terms of understanding and comprehension of the world's spirit energy and the heavenly Tao? If even he couldn't explain it, who could? A bone-chilling wind howled. Even with Qin's cultivation, he actually felt a chill that he hadn't felt in a long time. He seemed to know too little about Earth and his own home planet. In fact, if one really wanted to delve deeper into it, the biggest question in front of Qin was, how did he get to the heavenly jade world? How did he get there? Who sent him there? How did he get there? Even soul formation cultivators would be severely injured after crossing the void and returning. How did he wake up to the heavenly jade world as a mere mortal? But why? Was it all just a dream? Because only in a dream would such a fantastic story appear. As a spirit-severing cultivator, he had already experienced countless trials and tribulations. So how could he not know whether this was a dream or not? If it wasn't a dream, then what kind of terrifying unknown existence was it? Thinking of this, Qin couldn't help but feel inexplicably irritated. He had been cultivating for 500 years, and it was only at this moment that he suddenly realized something. It turned out that he was still an ant-like existence in front of some unknown power. All of a sudden, he felt an extremely stifling sensation. After returning to Earth, even though he was half-crippled, Qin could still be said to be the most powerful person in the world. However, as long as he didn't step into the immortal emperor realm, he would always be immortal. How insignificant were mortals? Even if he had reached the soul formation stage, he would only be one of the stronger ants among thousands of ants. Under the frosty snow and the bright moon, Qin's lonely figure floated in the air. He looked up at the bright moon. Then he suddenly looked up to the sky and roared. Surging true core strength kept surging out of his body. As his sleeves fluttered, an invisible shockwave spread out wildly with him as the center. Boom, boom, boom. It was like a bomber carrying out a carpet bombing. With Qin as the center, wherever the true essence spread out, all the rocks and vegetation would explode and scatter in all directions. In the blink of an eye, the already incomparably huge crater was actually expanded by him once more. A sword and a knife appeared in Chen-Shi's hands again. However, just as he was about to merge the sword and knife, Chen-Shi's mind suddenly flashed with the smiling faces of Qin Ruoying and Yan. The frost sword and knife turned into snowflakes again and fell one after another. Then, Chen-Shi's figures suddenly disappeared above the ruins. The next morning, maybe it was because of the time they spent together that the husband and wife almost reached the level of telepathy. Therefore, after Qin Ruoying got up, she felt that something was wrong with Chen-Shi today, but she couldn't tell exactly what was wrong. After serving the little fellow breakfast, Qin Ruoying helped Chen-Shi pack up as usual. When she was about to take the little fellow to the tea house, Chen-Shi suddenly spoke. "Ying, you can practice at home. I'll take Yan to the tea house." Qin Ruoying's face suddenly showed a big question mark. She looked at Chen-Shi, but Chen-Shi was smiling. She couldn't see anything strange from his face. Qin Ruoying was silent for a while, then asked seriously, "Why?" "Your cultivation progress is too slow. The beginning is the time to lay the foundation. If the early progress is too slow, it will affect your future development." As he spoke, Chen-Shi touched her smooth face. As if to prevent her from thinking too much, Chen-Shi paused. Before she could speak, he continued to add, "Wasn't it to cultivate feelings with Yan before? I think it's about time to cultivate. We can't be around the child all day, right? I don't care, but it will affect your cultivation. Didn't you say you would accompany me for 500 years? If you don't cultivate, how can you accompany me?" Qin Ruoying nodded, then turned to look at the little fellow who had run out of the west wing. Seeing this, Chen-Shi called the little fellow and said to her, "Yan, Mom has to study today, so I can't accompany you to the tea house. Dad will go with you, okay?" After hearing Chen-Shi's words, the little fellow tilted her head and thought for a while, then grinned and said, "Okay. Mom, you can do it. You have to study hard. Good girl, Mo. Come, say goodbye to Mom." Chen-Shi picked up the little fellow, and the little fellow waved goodbye to Qin Ruoying obediently. "Goodbye, Mom. Good girl, you can go." Qin Ruoying sent the father and daughter to the door. After watching their figures disappear at the end of the alley, she couldn't help but sigh. With her understanding of Chen-Shi, how could she not notice the difference in Chen-Shi? She chose not to ask, not because she didn't care, but to express a kind of support. No matter what Chen-Shi wanted to do, she would support him. Since Chen-Shi wanted her to concentrate on cultivation, then she would concentrate on cultivation. As for the rest, she believed that Chen-Shi would arrange it well. Qin Ruoying returned to her room and began to cultivate in seclusion. Chen-Shi took the little fellow to the tea house. As soon as they entered the tea house, the little fellow ran to the children's park and waited for the arrival of the brothers. Chen-Shi made himself a cup of tea and sat behind the bar, silently watching the little fellow. Chen-Shi didn't know how long the recovery of spirit qi would last. If it was just a temporary situation, it would be fine. But what if it would last for a long time? When the earth really changed from a planet in the age of chaos to a holy land for cultivation, what kind of changes would the world usher in? Everything was unknown. Human beings would always be afraid of the unknown. Since that was the case, it would be better for him to become stronger before that. Chapter 184. 11 o'clock in the morning. Gu Lao brought the two brothers to the tea house. He was slightly surprised that he didn't see Qin Ruoying today. In his impression, this young couple was inseparable. Even if they had to go out for business, it was usually Chen-Shi who went out, and Qin Ruoying stayed behind to take care of the children. Although he was puzzled, Gu Lao wasn't a gossipy old man. After taking the green tea that Chen-Shi brewed for him, he laughed and said, "Today's weather is good. Although the sun isn't out, I feel refreshed. When people get old, they tend to lose focus. It's rare for me to be so clear-headed. I'm really not used to it. Come. Since I'm in good spirits today, let's have a good fight." Gu Lao was in high spirits today, and it was obvious that he was in good spirits. However, his words made Qin Shi frown slightly. In order to not let Gu Lao notice his abnormality, Qin Shi immediately smiled and said, "Wait a moment, I'll go get the chess pieces." The so-called spring sleepiness, autumn lack, summer naps, and winter sleeps. Once winter came, the human body would be affected and stimulated by the low temperature, causing the capillaries under the skin to begin to contract, the blood flow would be relatively reduced, and the sweat glands and pores would close to reduce heat emission to maintain the normal body temperature. This was a biological instinct, so when winter came, everyone would feel sleepy and unable to wake up. Today wasn't a sunny day. Although it wasn't snowing, the thick dark clouds still covered a large part of the sun, and the temperature outside was estimated to be around 0 degrees. The reason why Gu Lao was in good spirits was clearly because of the recovery of spiritual energy, causing the spiritual energy in Hohai to skyrocket. It was almost at the level of Zongnanhai. Living in such a place, of course, one would feel refreshed. What would the rich spiritual energy directly affect? For immortal cultivators, cultivation would become easier, and even achieve twice the result with half the effort. Although mortals didn't know how to cultivate, if they lived in such a place with rich spiritual energy for a long time, their physical condition would become better and better, so much so that they would be immune to all diseases and live a long life. There were longevity villages all over the world, and these villages all had one thing in common, which was excellent geographical location. Deep canyons, lush forests, birds, flowers, and mountain springs. These places were called paradise, and at the same time, the best place to cultivate in seclusion. It was actually very easy to find a paradise. Wherever the average lifespan of the villagers was more than 80 years old, that place must be a paradise. Huaxia's leaders had a long lifespan. In addition to the professional healthcare team, the Blessed Land was also a big factor. Although mortals couldn't detect the existence of spiritual energy, they wouldn't know whether the place was good or not. A's days long's a long time. Only one night had passed, and even Gu Lao was affected. His spirit had also become much better. Thinking of this, Chen Shi asked Gu Lao to wait for a while, and then he got up and went back to the bar, and then called Qin Shueqing. The last time he called, Qin Shueqing didn't pick up, and she didn't call back. Chen Shi thought she was busy, so she threw the matter to the back of her mind. Now it seemed that this matter wasn't that simple. The phone went through, and after a while, Qin Shueqing's voice came from the other side. "Hello. It's me. Are you busy? I have a question to ask you." "Give me a second." Qin Shueqing was a little noisy on the other side. After a while, her voice came from the phone again. "Okay, go ahead." She was his sister-in-law, so Chen Shi didn't dawdle with her, and went straight to the topic. "Have you Wulian people noticed anything unusual recently? Like a vision of heaven and earth?" After hearing his question, Qin Shueqing was obviously shocked, and she hurriedly asked on the other side of the phone, "Who told you? Do I need someone to tell me?" Chen Shi replied matter-of-factly, and Qin Shueqing suddenly choked. After all, she had already experienced the strength of her cheap brother-in-law. Because Chen Shi's question involved some secrets, after hesitating for a while, Qin Shueqing whispered, "Yes, a large oasis suddenly appeared in the Taklamakan desert, and it's spreading out at an astonishing speed. Do you think plants need time to grow? But that place turned from a desert to an oasis overnight, which is obviously a supernatural phenomenon, so the Wu Lian blocked the news immediately. The desert turned into an oasis?" Chen Shi thought for a while and then asked again, "What else? Are there any changes in animals? For example, monsters and other existences, have there been more?" "Yes, it is said that a forest ranger saw a monster more than 3 meters tall in Shenangjia. The Wu Lian has sent people, but they haven't found any trace of the monster yet." Sure enough, the recovery of spirit power would bring great changes to the world. The desert turning into an oasis was only the first step, and there would be more and more wonders that ordinary people could not imagine. Maybe in the future, the earth would become like the Tianxian world. Qin Shueqing waited for a while, and seeing that Chen Shi didn't reply, she asked directly, "Do you know something?" Her question interrupted Qin Shi's thoughts. After thinking for a while, Chen Shi gave an irrelevant answer. You should cultivate according to the cultivation method I gave you. According to the current situation, you should be able to step into the foundation establishment stage very soon. At that time, you will naturally know what happened in this world. Foundation establishment. Chen Shi gave her the cultivation method, but he didn't teach her the general knowledge of the cultivation world, so Qin Xueqing was still a little confused about the specific realm, and could only practice according to the cultivation method every day in a daze. Qin Xueqing always felt that her cheap brother-in-law might know something, so she kept asking over the phone. However, Chen Shi didn't answer her questions at all, but said directly, "That's it, I'll hang up first." Everything happened too suddenly, and the time was still short, so Chen Shi couldn't make any conclusions for the time being. There was always a process to everything, and instead of making wild guesses, it was better to see the results when the time came. "Hey, wait, you said that as long as I form the golden core, my broken arm will be able to recover." Then Qi refinement, foundation establishment, golden core. What's above that? What level are you at? Soul formation. After saying that, Chen Shi didn't say anything more and directly hung up the phone. Hearing the beeping sound of the phone, Qin Xueqing couldn't help but think over and over again. Qi refinement, foundation establishment, golden core. Soul formation. Chapter 185. For the next few days, Chen Shi would bring the little girl to the tea house to date with the brothers every day. Qin Ruoying, on the other hand, was cultivating hard at home. Out of the 24 hours in a day, she really did cultivate for 20 hours. Cultivation was a boring thing to begin with. Since she had already decided to embark on this path, learning to enjoy the boredom and experiencing different kinds of pleasure from cultivation was the only thing Qin Ruoying had to do at the moment. Chen Shi had been paying attention to the news reports during this period. In addition, he was also constantly paying attention to the headlines, Weibo, public accounts, and other media platforms. Things were different now. With the arrival of the mobile internet era, even the old man selling pancakes on the street learned to use QR codes to collect money. If there was a phenomenon of heaven and earth, it would inevitably cause a big social sensation. Even if the government deliberately blocked it, there would always be some gossip circulating on the internet. But to Chen Shi's surprise, a few days had passed, and he couldn't find any news about the supernatural phenomenon of the desert turning into an oasis on the internet. With his sister-in-law's personality, he basically ruled out the possibility that she would joke with Chen Shi. Since he couldn't see it on the internet, it was either blocked by the government immediately, or because that place was so remote that not many people knew about it. However, it was understandable when he thought about it. The recovery of spirit qi would definitely affect those inaccessible places first, which gave the government some time to react. The Wulian people were probably out in full force and on standby at any time. Why was Chen Shi paying so much attention? Because this was also a big event that could affect him. Not to mention why a planet in the age of chaos suddenly became a holy land for cultivation. There must be a big secret hidden in how he got to the heavenly jade realm. 5 years on Earth, 500 years on heavenly jade. This involved time and space, which was obviously not a level that soul formation cultivators could understand. What kind of existence was capable of doing all this? Magic treasure? Spell? Array? Or human? Why did it choose him? And not someone else? Ever since Chen Shi discovered the recovery of spirit qi, these questions had been constantly flashing in his mind. It was true that he had 500 years of experience in the heavenly jade domain, but in essence, Chen Shi had always been the kind of person who would be satisfied as long as he had a wife and children, a hot pit, porridge, steamed buns, and 2 tails of wine. There was no shortage of ambitious great men in the world, but there was no shortage of contented mortals like Chen Shi. As long as his wife and daughter were well, and his family was harmonious, he could guard this small tea house and live happily for the rest of his life. Some people always believed that contentment equated to lack ambition. In fact, this was a sign of ignorance. It was perhaps the biggest joke in the world for a person who didn't have a strong heart to turn around and laugh at a person who had a strong heart. As the song goes, you are not truly happy, your smile is just a camouflage you wear. Being content with what one has doesn't mean that one won't be vigilant in times of peace. Being vigilant in times of peace did not mean that one would have groundless fears. The torrent of the era was coming, and she just wanted to continue her role as a spectator. Having seen all the prosperity of the world, one should naturally float like water. It's December 12th. Qin Yongyan, who had been in seclusion, was also called out by Qin Rui. Her sister-in-law's phone couldn't be reached, so the family of four took a taxi and went straight to the Badaling Great Wall. They were going to hold a strange wedding with no ceremony and no guests, only a father-in-law, wife, and son-in-law. No, there was also a daughter. Qin Ruing originally wanted to persuade Qin Shi to forget about it. After all, Nian Yan was already so old, and they had already gotten a marriage certificate. It felt a little strange to specially do this now. Although she had originally wanted to marry Qin Shi under her father's witness, she didn't need to do any ceremony. She didn't need any grand ceremony. As long as her father, second uncle's family, and Aunt Zhang were present, Qin Ruing would be satisfied. But second uncle hadn't come back yet, and Lin Qing was busy all day. In this winter, she couldn't specially invite Aunt Zhang to come to Shangjing to enjoy the cold wind, could she? She was overwhelmed by the joy of returning home, so she agreed to Qin Shi in a daze. Otherwise, she would have to think about it carefully and choose a good day. For example, after the new year, when the winter was over and the flowers bloomed in spring, it would be good. However, Qin Ruing wanted to change the day, but Qin Shi didn't agree. What a joke, how could he delay the matter of marrying a wife? It didn't matter if his family and friends were not there, as long as his father-in-law was there. The ceremony was not important, but the intention was important. Qin Shi didn't tell the little fellow what they were going to do today. He just said that he was going to take her for an outing, which made the little fellow very happy and excited. Qin Yongyan seemed to want to cultivate a relationship with the little fellow, so as soon as they got in the car, he let the little fellow sit on his lap and then let the little fellow climb around him. The Badaling Great Wall in December was not as lively as the National Day. Because it was in the mountains, the wind was particularly strong, and the temperature was several degrees lower than that in the city. The family of four bought the tickets and went up the Great Wall under the astonished gazes of the staff. The weather was too cold, and there were basically no tourists on the Great Wall at this time. The bare mountains were covered with snow everywhere. The cold wind whistled past. Afraid that the child would be cold, Qin Shi wrapped the little fellow with Jinchi. The most beautiful scenery on the Great Wall was in autumn. Because there were many maple trees planted in this area, in autumn, standing on the Great Wall and looking down, one would see the maple leaves below as red as fire, which could be said to reflect the ancient Great Wall. This was also a great beauty in Shangjing. So, was the Great Wall not beautiful in winter? No. Looking inside and outside the Great Wall, there was only luxuriant. Taizu only used such a poem to accurately summarize the beauty of the Great Wall in winter. Boundless and vigorous. Qin Yongyan held the little fellow and followed Qin Shi to the beacon tower on the north 5th floor. Seeing that he stopped moving forward, she asked with a smile, "What do you want to do for your wedding? Can you tell me now?" Qin Shi had been mysterious today. After hearing Qin Yongyan's words, Qin Ruing immediately turned to look at Qin Shi. She also wanted to see how Qin Shi was going to hold the wedding. Hearing this, Qin Shi smiled mysteriously at them, then turned and walked to the edge of the Great Wall. Immediately after, he pointed to the vast mountains covered with snow in front of him and said to Qin Ruing with a smile, "Why do we have to hold a wedding? Because a wedding is not a formality, it can bring a sense of ceremony to us. A sense of ceremony can make us more deeply remember everything that is happening now. Life is dull. No matter how passionate two people are when they are in love, when they are together, it will become daily necessities and domestic affairs. Dull life always tends to wear away our edges and make us forget who we were in the beginning. That's why people try their best to think of all kinds of romantic festivals and ceremonies. They want to use the sense of ceremony to remind themselves not to forget their original intentions. Just like the saying goes, Life is not just about the present, there is also poetry and the future. Since ceremonies are all thought of by people, then I can also think of a ceremony that is different from others. A ceremony that belongs only to us. Speaking of this, Chen Shi winked at Qin Ruoying, making her laugh. Only you can do it. Perhaps because Qin Yongyan and the little guy were still next to her, Qin Ruoying's face showed a bit of a shy expression for the first time. Chen Shi did not know if he was thick-skinned or not, but in short he completely ignored his father-in-law and focused all his attention on Qin Ruoying. At this moment he only had eyes for her. After gazing at the lover in front of him affectionately, the love in Chen Shi's heart suddenly gushed out like spring water. He turned around and faced the mountains. Looking inside and outside the Great Wall, there was only luxuriance. Chen Shi suddenly waved his hand and motioned for Qin Ruoying to come to his side. Qin Ruoying stood beside him and glanced at the barren mountains below. She suddenly had some doubts. What was there to see in this place? At this moment, Chen Shi suddenly shouted at the mountains in front of him, "Ying, deep feelings are not as good as long-term companionship. There is no need to say more about love. Today, I will let Qingshan wear red makeup for you." As soon as his voice fell, Chen Shi suddenly stepped on the ground. The true essence that he had accumulated for 500 years burst out in an instant, crazily gushing out from his body, suddenly shaking the whole mountain range. With Chen Shi as the center, the invisible true essence continued to spread out. In an instant, it was as if the god of spring had issued an edict. Wherever the true essence reached, flowers and trees bloomed. But the most abundant thing here was not flowers, but maple trees. On the snow-covered mountains, countless bare tree trunks suddenly sprouted, and new leaves grew at a speed visible to the naked eye. Like a landscape painting that had been splashed with paint, the barren mountains in front of them were instantly dyed green. Following that, the green turned to yellow, then red, until the forest was dyed with layers of green and gold. Chapter 186. Wow! The little fellow looked at the magical scene in front of her, and her little mouth couldn't help but turn into an O shape. She sat in Qin Yongyan's arms and couldn't help but feel a little excited when she saw the fiery red leaves on the mountain. "Grandpa, Grandpa, I want to go and see. Come over a bit." The little fellow wriggled her body and signaled Qin Yongyan to take her to the edge of the city wall. She wanted to take a closer look at the bright red maple leaves that covered the whole mountain. Qin Yongyan finally came back to his senses after being shaken by her. The heavy snow had passed, and in the blink of an eye, it was the winter solstice. It was supposed to be the late winter when everything was dormant, but Chen Shi's words actually made the plants on the mountain grow in reverse. In an instant, they had sprouted, grown leaves, sprouted stems, bloomed flowers, and bore fruit. According to legend, there were immortals in ancient times whose words contained the heavenly laws. What was the difference between Chen Shi's action and that of the immortals? A moment ago, it was still a barren mountain, and the next moment, it was full of vegetation. Qin Yongyan was really shocked and inexplicably. The impact of this scene on him was even more violent than when Chen Shi killed great-granduncle. What kind of cultivation method did Chen Shi make him practice? Could it really be the immortal's inheritance? After this period of cultivation, Qin Yongyan was about to step into the late stage of qi refining, so his understanding of immortal cultivators was much deeper than before. Every realm of immortal cultivators could be divided into 3 stages: the beginning, the middle, and the end. For example, Qin Yongyan had already gone through 2 stages: the early stage of qi condensation, the middle stage of body tempering, and the late stage of aperture opening, which was about to step into. Once all the apertures were opened, then he could step into the second major realm of immortal cultivation, foundation establishment. It was also because of this that there was a huge gap between the early stage of golden core and the middle stage of golden core. Thinking of this, Qin Yongyan couldn't help but frown and silently glance at his son-in-law several times. He was now a little curious. What was Chen Shi's cultivation level? Just as Qin Yongyan was blindly pondering, the little fellow in his arms suddenly giggled. The child didn't understand so much. She only knew that the scenery in front of her was very beautiful, so she wrapped one arm around Qin Yongyan's neck and pointed at the maple leaves below the city wall with the other hand. She kept muttering that it was so beautiful. The mountain full of maple leaves facing the morning sun, the green mountain for you in red makeup. Chen Shi's ceremony was so shocking that Qin Ruing held her lover's hand tightly and didn't come back to her senses for a long time. Due to the presence of his father-in-law, Chen Shi did not do anything too intimate. He gently squeezed Qin Ruing's delicate hand, then turned to look at his lover and asked with a smile, "What do you think? Do you like it?" The cold winter wind whistled past. Qin Ruing's red lips slightly opened as she muttered, "I like, as long as you like it." Chen Shi smiled and didn't say anything else. It was just as he had said. Deep feelings were not as good as long-term companionship. This was the truth of the world. 20 minutes later, the family of 4 left the Great Wall. At this time, many local residents who heard the news had gathered at the ticket office at the foot of the mountain, ready to go up the mountain to see what was going on. This place was 1,000 meters above sea level. Even if it was a sunny day, the temperature was far below zero. The mountain full of maple trees bloomed in this season of frost. It could be said that the rain hit the pine trees green, and the frost dyed the maple leaves red. It was a wonderful scene. If nothing unexpected happened, this supernatural phenomenon would cause a sensation in the country in half an hour, and even attract the attention of foreign media. There was no ceremony, no guests, and even the most common bowing to heaven and earth, then to parents, and then to husband and wife. Chen Shi naturally called out, "Dad," which made Qin Yongyan and Qin Ruing laugh. The little girl didn't know why her mother and grandfather were so happy, but when she saw that they were happy, she was also very happy. She lay on Qin Yongyan's shoulder and kept giggling. When they went home, the family of 4 didn't go directly home. Instead, they went to Quanzhou to treat the little girl to a meal of authentic Shangjing roast duck. When it came to eating roast duck, the duck leg was obviously the child's favorite part. In order to make it easier for the little girl to eat, Qin Ruing specifically told the waiter not to keep the duck leg for her. After the dishes were served, the little girl proudly held a duck leg in each hand and gnawed on it until her mouth was full of oil. Today, the 2 brothers weren't around. The little girl bit the duck leg and suddenly remembered her other little friend, Big Cat. Recently, the little girl didn't disturb the big cat, so it was happy to be free. Moreover, it was allowed by Chen Shi to stay at home and practice all day long like Qin Ruing. It didn't even need to go out. It was very leisurely all day long. They were sitting in a private room with a TV in it. As expected, during the afternoon news, Shangjing TV station broadcasted a special interview about the wonders of Badaling. It could only be said that the response was really fast. They even specially invited 2 professors from Tsinghua University, a botanist and a meteorologist. Uncle will teach your sister how to skate first, okay? All right. The 2 brothers nodded and then sat on the ice carriage obediently, watching the little guy carefully step forward under Chen Shi's guidance. Skating was actually a kind of muscle memory. No matter how good a skater was, if they hadn't skated for decades, they might fall when they stepped on the ice again. Children learn things very quickly. Under normal circumstances, Chen Shi should be able to teach the little fellow to skate in an afternoon. However, because there were still 2 brothers waiting in line, Chen Shi could only give the little fellow a cheat. He first let the little fellow try to learn how to stand on the ice. Then, the little fellow raised her hands and let Chen Shi hold her hands from above. With Chen Shi's help, the little fellow quickly adapted to the feeling of standing on the ice. After she adapted, Chen Shi said softly, "Nyan, be good. Daddy will support you. Slowly move forward. Look, just like that uncle move." Although her father was next to her, the little fellow was still very afraid that she would suddenly fall. Chen Shi held her hand and patiently encouraged her several times. Then, the little fellow carefully tried to take a step forward. Very good. Now we have to learn from that uncle and let ourselves float. In the eyes of outsiders, they were a pair of father and daughter who were learning to skate. But in fact, at this moment, the little fellow's whole body was wrapped in Chen Shi's true essence. As soon as the little fellow took a step forward, Chen Shi used his true essence to push her into a standard posture. She thought that her father was pushing her, so she didn't care. After trying to walk forward for a short while, the little fellow began to get used to it. After Chen Shi took her around the ice car a few times, the nervous expression on the little fellow's face finally disappeared. It seemed to be very simple. She was so happy that she began to be carried away again, so she immediately shouted, "Papa, let go of me. I'll do it myself." Learning to skate required confidence. This was a good thing, so Chen Shi quickly let go of her hand. The little fellow silently felt for a moment. After finding that the feeling was still there, she began to skate forward by herself. At first, she walked very slowly, probably because she was afraid that she would fall. But under the guidance of Chen Shi's true essence, the little fellow found that no matter how she walked, she would not lose her center of gravity. So she took a step forward and directly ran on the ice. It was not right to say that she was running, because she was using a standard posture. Her body was slightly bent, her center of gravity was shifted forward, and she kept stepping on the ice to move forward. In fact, she was now like learning to ride a children's bicycle. Chapter 190. Chen Shi didn't take the two Japanese seriously at all. They were merely at the peak of concealing power. They couldn't even beat the big cat. Naturally, they were nothing to worry about. In the afternoon, the three little guys were not so enthusiastic about ice skating. Children were a little bit fond of the new and tired of the old. Perhaps because they thought they had learned it, after playing for a while, they began to wander around and came to the ice hockey area. Ice hockey was a recently popular ice game in Shangjing. This game was born 300 years ago during the Qianlong period, flourished during the Republic of China period, and gradually disappeared in the 1980s and 1990s. A few years ago, after the successful bid of the Winter Olympics in Shangjing, this long-established ice sport with both competitive and recreational characteristics was promoted by the government and flourished in Shangjing again. The game of ice hockey was very similar to curling, but more competitive. The field was a rectangle of 12 meters long and 2 meters wide. One end was red, the other was blue. The center of the field was a circular scoring area. The game was very simple. Each side had 5 balls. The red team started first. Like curling, they pushed their red ball to the center of the circular area and occupied the most central position. When it was the blue team's turn, except for the first ball that couldn't hit the red team's ball, the other 4 balls could hit the red team's ball. Because the friction on the ice was very small, the ice ball could slide far away if it was hit slightly. The core of the game was to hit the opponent's ball and let your own ball stay in the central scoring area. After the 5 balls were hit, the score was calculated according to the scoring area occupied. Whoever had the highest score would win. It's like playing marbles. Simple. I know how to play. After Chen Shi briefly explained the game to the 3 little guys, they immediately jumped up in excitement. She was now a master of marbles, and the 2 brothers played with her more often than not. After listening to Chen Shi's explanation, the little guys suddenly felt that this game was similar to marbles. They couldn't help but be eager to try. The ice hockey area was very large, and many fields had been drawn on the ground. Chen Shi took them to randomly choose a field, and the 3 little guys used rock paper scissors to decide who would play first. Rock paper scissors had never been the elder brother's strength, so he lost without any suspense. The little guy and the younger brother played first. She was on the red team, so she started first. How could a child know so much? So the little guy didn't even consider how much strength he should use. He kicked the red ball right in front of his younger brother, which made the two brothers laugh out loud. Chen Shi shook his head as he watched. The little fellow pouted, looking unhappy. Therefore, after taking a hit, the big cat was actually fine. It shook its body and stood up again. Meow! Even a human would be enraged after being hit by such a palm for no reason, let alone a wild beast like him. After being attacked, the big cat didn't hesitate at all. After getting up from the ground, its body rapidly expanded, and in an instant, it changed back to its original form. The big cat's body didn't become bigger to scare people, but to increase its combat power. Monsters could only rely on themselves. Therefore, in theory, the bigger their body, the stronger their combat power. Seeing the black cat in front of him turn into a black panther whose body was comparable to a fierce tiger's, the man in the kimono wasn't surprised at all. Instead, he smiled and said, "Yori Yori." Just as he was putting on the airs of an expert, the big cat had already turned into a black shadow and pounced towards him again. This time, the big cat really treated him as prey. Although the man in the kimono had succeeded in his attack, when he saw the big cat pouncing on him again, he didn't let his guard down. Instead, he suddenly put his palms together in front of his chest and instantly formed several hand seals. Yori Yori Yori. Yori Yori Yori, if translated in Huaxia, it would be, Chapter 195. Meow. The big cat looked at the helmet on the ground with some surprise. Although it had high intelligence, it lacked knowledge and experience, so it could not understand the strange situation in front of it. How could an empty set of armor possess the power to match its own? The helmet that fell to the ground rolled a few times, which attracted the big cat's attention. While it was distracted, the headless armor began to move again. The katana was raised high and then slashed down at the big cat. The cold moonlight shone on the katana, making the blade seem even sharper than before. The big cat quickly dodged to the side, but the armored samurai followed closely. After the first slash missed, the armored samurai continued to slash a second time. One slash after another, without the slightest pause, as if he never knew fatigue. This armor was obviously a dead object, similar to a puppet doll. The big cat did not have the habit of fighting with this kind of dead object. Therefore, it could only keep dodging. However, the armored samurai followed him like a shadow. He held his katana and kept chasing after him without stopping for a single breath. The big cat retreated more than 10 meters, but the armored samurai was still chasing after it. Meow! The big cat let out a rather angry growl. However, it was not an idiot who only knew how to fight recklessly. Even cheetahs would choose to use sneak attacks when hunting, using the most direct and effective method, let alone it. After discovering that the armored samurai was just a puppet, the big cat naturally did not want to be entangled with it anymore. Therefore, when the big cat retreated more than 10 meters, it suddenly jumped to the side of the roof, then stepped on the roof and rushed directly toward the man in the kimono. Its strong point was not its strength, but its agility. Every slash of the armored samurai was powerful, but if one looked carefully, his movements were extremely slow. So after the big cat took him away from the man in the kimono, it suddenly jumped to the roof, ready to get rid of the armored samurai and directly attack the enemy. However, Big Cat's every action was within the man's expectations. Seeing the black cat pouncing towards him again, the man in the kimono couldn't help but sneer. Wild beasts were still wild beasts after all. Apart from being reckless, there was nothing else they could do. The purpose of the test had been achieved, and the kimono man was no longer interested in playing with the big cat. Thus, he took out a yellow rectangular piece of paper. There were many strange patterns and lines drawn in ink on the paper. They looked very similar to the charms in the temples. The big cat jumped down from the roof and pounced on him. The man in the kimono held the note in his left hand while his right hand quickly made a few gestures. Then, he looked at the big cat in midair and coldly shouted, "Ratty, ratty, ratty. Spirit of speech, bind." After the man in the kimono sized up the big cat on the roof, the expression on his face became a little serious. He didn't see the owner of this place come out after such a fierce fight, so he guessed that the other party wanted to test his strength through this monster. He didn't come here to play with this beast. If he couldn't even take care of a pet guarding the door, then he might as well go home now. Thinking of this, the man in the kimono couldn't help but look down at the katana in the armored warrior's hand. When he saw the bloodstains on it, the man in the kimono nodded in satisfaction. Then he took out 3 talismans from his arms. Don't let others look down on you. The big cat had already suffered a loss from the talismans, so when it saw the man in the kimono take out 3 yellow talismans, it immediately let out a low growl. Meow! The big cat grimaced. An injured beast was the most terrifying. This man in the kimono had completely angered it. However, when the big cat let out a low growl, it suddenly sensed something and quickly turned its head to look to the side. A figure appeared beside it at some point. The big cat was stunned, but the person directly rubbed its head with his hand. The big cat, who came back to its senses, didn't attack him. Instead, it seemed to be enjoying it, and couldn't help but slightly squint its eyes. "You did well today, this is your reward." The person lightly patted the big cat's head, and then stuffed a few pills into its mouth. The big cat swallowed the pills, and then rubbed its body against the person's leg. The ink leopard, whose body was comparable to a fierce tiger, was nestled under the person's leg at this moment, and constantly let out a pet cat's meowing sound. It looked really strange in the alley. The man in the kimono looked up at the scene in front of him, and couldn't help but frown. He really didn't understand. Chapter 196. In the quiet alley, under the dark night sky, the young man who suddenly appeared on the roof immediately attracted all the attention of the man in the kimono. When did he get here? Where did he come from? How did he appear on the roof in the blink of an eye? The man in the kimono looked very calm on the surface, but there were waves in his heart. At this time, the man in the suit also saw the young man who suddenly appeared on the roof, so he immediately took a few steps forward and came to the side of the man in the kimono. Then, he said in an extremely low voice, "Mr. Abe, he is Mr. Chen." "Mr. Abe, he is Mr. Chen? I had already guessed it." "Yo." Yes, after the two of them had a simple conversation, the man in the kimono signaled the man in the suit to leave. Then, he took a step forward and said to the young man on the roof in a deep voice, "Inyang Liao's Vice Minister, Inyang Quanzhu, Shintaro Abe here, greets Your Excellency." After saying that, the man in the kimono patted his chest heavily with his right hand, and then made a chest-patting salute to Chen Shi on the roof. The man in the kimono's Mandarin was not standard, and it was somewhat like the Japanese accent that was commonly seen in TV dramas. Because of the long-term influence of the Bushido spirit, Japanese practitioners often regarded honor as more important than life, so they could not accept any mistakes, and once they made a mistake, it was very likely that they would choose to commit suicide by committing suicide. This kind of slightly morbid national culture also made them particularly worship the strong. As long as the other party was stronger than them, they would be able to obtain supreme respect. But if the other party was weaker than them, then Sari Inyang Liao was an official organization, mainly composed of 4 officers, technical officers, and instructors, and had various diplomatic departments and direct subordinates under them. If Enyang Liao was compared to a county, then Vice Minister Enyang Quanju could be considered as the vice mayor of this county. A county usually has 1 mayor, 5 to 10 vice mayors, or more. Enyang Quanju was considered one of the top figures in Enyang Liao. Since such a figure appeared in Hua Xia's capital, he would naturally be monitored by the Wu Lian. This was a matter of great importance, so Shintaro Abe decided to pay them a personal visit. However, because the Wu Lian inspection office was following him closely, Shintaro Abe could only choose such a bad time to visit. Chen Shi stood on the roof and gently stroked Big Cat's head. At the same time, he used his true essence to stop the wound on Big Cat's back. After hearing Shintaro Abe's words, Chen Shi did not immediately reply. Instead, he silently looked at the 2 Japanese below. The man in the suit had given him a business card before, but this was the first time the man in the kimono had seen it. What kind of existence was a celestial being? Shintaro Abe thought that the man in the suit was actually thinking of revenge. This kind of thinking was really stupid, because his motto was, "There were no eternal enemies or eternal friends in this world. There were only eternal interests." Although the visit ended in failure, Shintaro Abe didn't think it was too bad. After all, the great era was coming. An individual's strength would always be powerless in the face of a huge organization.